This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with James O'Brien.
It's 3 minutes after 10 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. A very good morning to you. Extraordinary news if you haven't been paying attention. Entirely predictable news if you have. The fall in net migration, just reported by the Office of National Statistics, stands at 49% in 2024. That is the number of people arriving in the UK minus the number of people leaving. And half, give or take a few bodies, is the percentage figure estimated, and of course there's room for review. Estimated net migration to the UK stood at a provisional 431,000 in the year to December of last year, December 2024, which is down 50% from the year to December 2023. It is, and it is the largest numerical drop on record. The largest numerical drop since records began. And it's only 4 minutes after 10, and you know how it works. I often come on air without knowing where we're going to be at 10:15, let alone 1 o'clock in the afternoon. But I'm already wondering whether it matters a jot to the overweening narrative. I'm already wondering. For a couple of reasons. Some of them obvious, some of them perhaps less so. One of the more obvious reasons is that, listen, if I framed the question in this way, I suddenly realised how arrogant it would make me sound. So I did a trail that would ordinarily play out at about 9:45, just, in the final, the closing quarter of Nick's show. You know how, if you listen, you've heard it before. But because David Gauke was in the studio, very impressive politician, David Gauke. But because he was in the studio, they dropped the adverts, which meant they didn't play my little trail. But my little trail would have said something like this. I've been telling you for months that net migration was about to halve. How on earth could 9 out of 10 people have not been expecting it to, which is what the latest polling tells us. And I suddenly realised, as Eleanor began to prepare the trail that was never played, I suddenly realised that makes it sound like I think everybody in the entire country is listening to my burblings every morning, which would be a position, even by my standards, of quite epic conceit. But it does actually raise the question of how on earth could more people not know? How on earth could more people not know that net migration was set to fall by about a half? Something I've been telling you, I've been hitting you over the head with this, because the numbers are generally available. They are not hard to find. Why would nobody bother to look? Answer, because there's a lot more, quotes, fun, end quotes, to be had, whipping up hatred about migration in general and asylum seekers in particular, to the point where the last call on Nick's show was joining in right-wing media's attempts to turn a woman who publicly called for a pogrom into some sort of folk hero or cause célèbre. The narrative about immigration, in other words, has often, but not always, been completely at odds with the reality. And that is why, at risk of being part of the problem as opposed to part of the solution, I find myself wondering whether it will matter a jot. I really do. Those are the figures. Those are the numbers. Some people... How do you think the immigration obsessives will respond to these numbers? Do you think they'll respond by claiming that it was... that it's all false, that it's not true? By pointing at the relatively tiny proportion of migration that comes over the English Channel irregularly, shouting about that instead of the overall totals, the actual numbers, accuse them of lying or accuse them of embellishment. I don't trust the figures. I don't trust them. Did you trust them when they were really, really high? Yes. Do you trust them now they've halved? No. Okay, what does that tell us about you? I've no idea, but I suspect that you're limbering up for a spell in Idiot's Corner. And I suspect today that Idiot's Corner is going to be rather busy, so much so I'm going to pause my inbox to see how it goes. 8 minutes after 10 is the time. So 431,000, down almost 300,000 on the previous figure, the 6-month figure of 728, and down 50%, give or take, on the previous year. 8 minutes after 10. I don't know. I'm not celebrating. these numbers, by the way. I want to make that absolutely clear. People who wish that the conversation around immigration was less toxic and less racist are not by any stretch of the imagination suggesting that we can accommodate 10 million people a year or 2 million people a year or even 1 million people a year in net totals. It's another very clever play that's used by immigration obsessives to claim that anybody who suggests that the problems of the average person in this country are more likely caused by plutocrats, oligarchs, the distribution of wealth and the collapse of workers' rights and trade unions than they are by your colleague who happens to have come here from Poland or Pakistan. Those of us who are actually committed to the ordinary working people of the UK to the extent that we want them to know the truth about the country that they live in, as opposed to the often jingoistic lies, are very easily portrayed as naive or as dangerous or as part of the problem. What would you do? What would you do if you owned a right-wing newspaper and there was someone popping up every now and then saying, do you know what? I think the people with 10 country estates might have more to do with the housing problems in this country than your neighbour from Poland or Pakistan. You'd want to shut them down, right? How are you going to shut them down if all they do is tell the truth? You have to portray them as something that they're not. So you can see it everywhere. Why do you think Gary Lineker became public enemy number one long before his regrettable social media conduct last week? Because he spoke up for people who value the truth, because he spoke up for people who were being pilloried and condemned and blamed for problems caused by entirely different people. Here go the figures. Here they are. Net migration is down by 50%. There'll be people on the left who actually that's not true. That's a lazy breakdown, isn't it? There's plenty of people on the right who aren't obsessed with immigration. Plenty of people on the right who are perfectly comfortable with the distribution of wealth in this country, but don't like the way that foreign-born folk get pilloried for it or get scapegoated for other problems. You might want to see increased funding to the NHS. It doesn't mean that you want to throw people out who weren't born here, but loosely speaking, left has come to mean opposed to racism or opposed to immigration obsession, and right has come to mean, well, far right certainly has come to mean can't really talk about anything else and don't care about the facts. So there'll be people on the left pointing out that these numbers possibly render a lot of what Keir Starmer has done in recent days unnecessary. A lot of the unpleasantness contained within his words, if not necessarily his policies, about an island of strangers. And what was the adjective he used to describe the episode? It wasn't toxic, pungent. I can't remember. I do apologise. But the language was ultimately quite troubling, very troubling for some of us. And the argument that he didn't need to do that because he knew this was on the horizon is quite powerful. The other argument, of course, is that he did it very deliberately because, like anybody who's been paying attention, and I can tell you for a fact there's plenty of people in my profession who've been as surprised by these numbers as many people who don't get paid to pay attention to the news. He knew these numbers were coming and has positioned himself as committed to a reduction in immigration shortly before the biggest reduction in net migration on record has been announced. It's extraordinary, isn't it? I'm sure, writes Adam, that the usual grifters are lining up to blame Labour for the drop in net migration. They've made such a mess of the country that nobody wants to come here. I don't think they will, mate, because they're on a hiding to nothing if they do. They've spent their entire lives calling for epic drops in net migration, and now they've got one. I wonder how big a factor that is. This is one of my pet subjects. As you look at the breakdown of numbers, and you know, and you certainly don't need me to tell you, that the Hong Kong and Ukraine influxes, welcoming refugees, if they are the right type of refugee, of course, in this country, has contributed to the recent spikes. You will also know that Tory policies introduced by Rishi Sunak and James Cleverly will be largely responsible for a fairly hefty reduction in the number of dependents that are accompanying people when they come here to work. I think that's probably standing at around the 35% mark. And the difference between the number of people moving to the UK and leaving the country is also driven by relatively high numbers of people leaving the country. And the bit I sometimes wonder about, squalid was the word I was looking for, thank you. The bit I was interested in is how attractive a country it's become. Is it half as attractive now to people who want to come here to work and study than it was a year ago? Have we made Brexit Britain 50% less attractive to people who've got actual choices, people who have got options about where they work or where they study, people who can choose which country, if not their own, that they want to pay tax in or pay tuition fees? And we have somehow achieved the extraordinary result of making ourselves 50% less attractive to those people. I don't know. And I don't know how you would ever be able to measure it. Emigration's up 11%, 517,000 people leaving the country. I'd quite like to do a phone-in, if not today, then at some point, about why are you leaving this country. Obviously, I'm not going to be able to reach the 517,000 who left last year. Doing a phone-in in the UK, asking people who've left the UK to ring in and talk to me would be a little bit like that time I almost did a phone-in about what it's like not to have a phone. I got halfway through the invitation to ring in and tell me what it's like to not have a phone before I realised that was possibly not the finest topic in the history of phone-in radio. But asking 517,000 people who've left the country to give me a ring in this country and tell me why. I know there's loads of people listening overseas, but you take my point. I have two problems now. The first is that historically, stories that I am telling you about for the first time, stories that haven't had 24 hours to percolate through your consciousness, to prick your thinking, to pique your interest, stories that, I know there are some people in this business who can't talk about a story until they've seen it through the lens of Daily Mail coverage. But you struggle sometimes to respond to things that you're hearing about for the first time. I don't mean that rudely. I do too. You know, my ducks would be in more of a row on this issue at 10 o'clock tomorrow than they are now because the numbers only dropped 10 minutes ago. And I knew they were coming. So goodness knows what it's like to process this information if you didn't know they were coming, if you weren't expecting this historic fall. And Starmer, of course, promises that the figures will continue to fall, quotes, significantly over the next 4 years. There's currently no reason to predict that they won't. Whether it's for good or for ill is a different conversation. But my two problems, the first is you haven't had time necessarily to come up with interesting responses and opinions on this. I'm not going to take that one to the bank. I'm going to say, yes, you have. You've had almost as long as me. And of course, if you've been listening recently, these figures won't have come as a surprise to you. So I'm going to back you on this. I'm going to absolutely stake my program on your ability to answer the question I'm about to ask. But the second problem I've got is the problem of counterfactual. The problem that is best summed up by this being, well, I don't think there's much room for doubting the numbers. If you doubt these numbers, then you have to doubt the numbers that got you angry in the first place. But the second problem I've got is looking into a crystal ball. I prefer sometimes questions that are built on detail and observable evidence. Beyond the numbers, we've actually got nothing here. Beyond the numbers themselves, there's not a great deal to analyse and unpick. In fact, my own catchphrase has just come back to haunt me, hasn't it? When I say that's not an opinion, that's counting, it closes down a conversation. Today, we almost want to do it the opposite way round. Today, we've done the counting. Now I want the opinions. So I might even end up saying that's not counting, that's an opinion. So here's the question. For whatever reason, and it may be that you are going to be the proof of your own particular pudding on this, for whatever reason, do you think these numbers will make much difference to anything? I'm referring once again to that final call to David Gauke just towards the end of Nick's show. Right-wing media now putting almost all of its tanks on the lawn of the justice system in defence of a woman who publicly called for a pogrom when there were raging mobs rampaging through the streets of this country. She encouraged them to set fire to hotels containing asylum seekers. Technically, a pogrom would normally look at ethnic or religious affiliation before being applicable in the context of calls to kill them or calls to burn down their homes. But given that the toxic rhetoric during the Farage riots was almost entirely directed at people perceived as Muslims, I'm comfortable using the word pogrom to describe what that imprisoned woman did in the very crucible of public rioting. So that is part of the narrative of immigration in this country. How can a woman who I read in the Daily Mail is a very model of good citizenship and neighbourly spirit, how can she end up publicly calling for a pogrom? Imagine if she'd said, go and burn all the synagogues. I don't care if that makes me racist. Go and burn all the churches. I don't care if that makes me racist. Go and burn all the mosques. I don't care if that makes me racist. That is a big part of the narrative of immigration in this country. Do the numbers change any of it? I hope they do, because I hate the hate. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. Is your Uncle Keith or your Auntie Doris going to stop posting racist memes on Facebook because immigration figures have actually just come down by the largest percentage ever? 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. What do you think? It's 10:19.
James O'Brien on LBC.
21 minutes after 10. It's a vague question, but it's the only one I can think of at the moment, and it's the only one I'm really interested in the answers to. As the UK records the biggest drop in net migration since records began, I want to know whether you think it will change anything. What would the usual suspects sing about if they weren't singing about how awful immigration is? Nikki in Kent writes, the numbers will make no difference because already those strange broadcasters who are a repository for reform and Conservative MPs are saying, oh, there's still 500,000 people coming in. That's a third of the size of the city of Birmingham. And that's all people will hear. That's how it will be framed, along with the Express and the Mail and the Telegraph and all the usual culprits. So I don't think it's going to make a blind bit of difference. Logically, if this angers you, you should be half as angry as you were yesterday, shouldn't you? Or is that a stupid observation? If you are somebody who struggles to explain precisely why, but likes the language of half the size of Birmingham or our public services can't cope, please don't mention that public satisfaction with the NHS was the highest it's ever been in 2010, and then we had 14 years of austerity and cuts, and now we're going to blame people who weren't born here for the fact that public services have been reduced. But don't mention any of that. You're angry about immigration. Shouldn't you today be half as angry as you were yesterday? Davey writes, these numbers will not change, these people, unfortunately, James, but like you, I live on the hopium that it will. That hopium, of course, is a consequence of contempt for the con men, compassion for the conned. I know that people like Farage and the editor of the Daily Mail and the Express, they can't change their tune because it's the only tune they've got. Immigration is awful. Bring it down to 100,000 and they'd be complaining about that. But for people who are subject to their journalism, I use the word very loosely, do you think that this will change anything? Stephen tells me, I was at Salisbury Hospital earlier this month. They have a board with 42 flags pinned to it, James, representing all the nations of the people who work within the trust. How would your listeners in Idiots Corner or Reform UK MPs and voters think that the NHS, their GP surgeries, social care would function without these wonderful people who travel to the UK to help make it work? Well, you'd have to ask them. Hayden writes, I don't think the drop in migration figures will matter a jot, James. The perception will be on fairness. And you've given previous discussions on the idea of a queue system. That's the idea that if someone has come here from overseas and gets something in return for their labour, in return for their work, it's easily portrayed as being unfair to people who feel that they've been standing in a queue waiting for their share and not getting it in time. And the perception, perhaps, if these numbers continue to come down, will shift to irregular or unusual migration, where people are perceived to be skipping the queue in UK life. But again, I mean, how naive does it sound to say, surely you will be half as angry today as you were yesterday? 0345 6060 973. It's already too late, far too little too late, writes this texter. This country is finished. That's an interesting rhetoric, the language of treachery and hatred of your own country. But born of what? Hatred of people who don't look like you? Well, there's half as many of them coming now as there were yesterday. Surely you should be half as racist as you were. 0345 6060 973. Lewis is in Liverpool. Lewis, what do you reckon?
Hiya, James. You all right?
Very well, mate.
Very good. So the issue we have is, obviously, we can't have the information regarding illegal immigrants. So I appreciate you've got the ones from the National Office of Statistics, and I'm not saying that's wrong, but we haven't got the full picture. So we don't know how many people are here illegally.
So if the ONS revealed that zero net migration, you'd still be worried about the illegal immigrants?
I didn't say I was worried.
What
so
then?
Terribly sorry. Sorry, go on.
No, you're talking about yourself, or you're predicting the narrative of other people?
Oh, both, actually. So at the moment, you see, the thing is, now, I know you said before that you represent some working people. I think you said that about 10 minutes ago.
In terms of how important information is, for example, between 2020 and the end of September 2024, there are about 175,000 unauthorised arrivals in this country, of which 78% arrived after crossing the Channel. Those are the numbers you said weren't available. That's what I mean by giving. That's what I mean by giving people the information they need.
Okay, so the thing is, though, overall, we haven't got all the information because they're here illegally. So the fact that they're here illegally...
Yes, but you know when they reveal how many people have crossed the Channel in a small boat, you know how they get that number?
Yeah, they count them probably.
They do what?
Count them probably.
Right, and what do you end up with when you count things?
A total.
A number. So if you're saying, but there'll be loads that haven't been counted, that would also apply to the entire country. They're births that aren't registered.
Well, you've got people coming in lorries and what have you.
Not so much anymore, actually. They were pretty good at shutting down the lorry routes, which is why everybody started getting in the dangerous dinghies and risking their lives.
Well, I mean, we'll never know, will we, really?
Well, we have a fairly good indication because the measure is fairly reliable. And it's, of course, a fraction of the legal figures anyway. Even if you could count every single one hiding in every mythical boot and lorry in the land, we would have a tiny proportion of the overall numbers. But here is the massive... here's the massive official number, and here's Lewis saying, I don't really care about that. I care about the relatively tiny unofficial number.
I didn't say those words, but I understand where you're coming from.
Everyone heard you.
Okay. So, going forward, do you understand how some people, working class people, are concerned with immigration?
I object to your use of the words working class. There are loads of posh people who hate immigration as well.
I didn't say, sorry, James, I didn't say hate.
There are loads of posh people who are very concerned about immigration as well.
Yeah, they're probably off maybe for different reasons. So, working class people may be concerned because of the jobs that we can do. Now, can you understand how that would be a real worry for working class people?
Of course I can. Can you understand why you should be half as concerned today as you were yesterday?
Can I? Not really, no.
Okay. Why not?
Because the thing is, well, I'd still be concerned. For example, I mean, I work with my hands. I do quite a labour-intensive job. That's just due to... I'm not going to go into that situation it is now. If somebody came over to a building site from another country and they could undercut me because they haven't got a mortgage and they haven't got a family, can you understand how that's going to put me in a bit of a mess? Like,
of course I could if it was true, but it would not be their fault. It wouldn't be their fault, would it? It would be the construction industry is currently a protected trade. They can't find people to do the job, so it's one of the few sectors where you get a special visa to actually come here because they. Don't keep saying my name, Lewis. This is what I mean about giving people the facts they need to have informed opinions.
Can I talk?
Well, I'm responding to what you've said.
Have you worked on a building site recently?
I like the way you've said recently.
Yeah, recently. I know you haven't. I know you did a bit in a couple. I do listen to your show.
I don't think my experience on a building site is relevant. Is recent enough to be relevant. But have you read the?
James.
No, Lewis. I've answered your question. Now you need to answer mine. Are you aware of what the status of most elements of the construction industry is in relation to visa immigration?
Yeah, we need plumbers, gas fitters, electricians.
So who's getting undercut?
Who's getting undercut?
Yeah.
What overall?
You're getting undercut by people who aren't allowed to come here anymore.
Well, they are allowed to come.
No, they're not. Only if they've got a visa.
You're not letting me. You see, James, you're not letting me get my words out.
No,
I'm not as good.
Well, you carry on then. I'll be quiet for a while.
I'm not as good with words as you are. Okay, so I'm not like now. If you're a labourer or you're a builder or a joiner, and you need to get a certain amount a day, okay, and then someone from another country comes along who isn't English or isn't British, sorry, regardless of what they look like, and said, I can do that for half the price, and that they'll get the job. Now, I know you're saying that you don't think that's true.
No, I'm not saying that. If you'd let me speak, I'd tell you what I am saying. Okay, so under the rules brought in largely by Rishi Sunak and James Cleverly, the problem you describe, I'm sure, exists or used to exist, but literally and directly under the new rules brought in, the people you're describing are not allowed to come here. They cannot get a visa because they are not... No, this is why the numbers have halved. Why do you think the numbers have halved?
Well, if you'd like to come up to Liverpool...
No, I'd like you to answer my question. I've answered yours. Why do you think the numbers have halved?
You haven't answered it, though, James, my mate. You haven't. I don't want to fall out with you because you're a good person, but you haven't answered it. If you would like, I'm quite happy for one of your...
Why do you think the numbers have halved?
I think the numbers have halved because probably it's harder for a lot of, say, intelligent people with degrees to come here and get jobs.
No, it's not, you see.
It's not.
No.
Yeah, I think it would. It might be, though. I mean,
no, it's harder for precisely the people you're talking about to come here. I mean, I don't want to fall out with you either, but it just is. That's why they brought in it's why they're called skilled workers visas.
Yeah.
So there's no visas for unskilled workers.
Well, they're getting here somehow, like James. I mean, I quite well.
Well, then we're back to the question of why do you think it's gone down by half, mate?
It's gone. Well, that's just down to the government not managing it properly, isn't it?
No, it's halved. So that's got to be better than yesterday if you've got a problem with the issue generally.
No.
So the skilled workers visa means that the people who are not challenging for unskilled labour are finding it impossible or much harder to come here. How many people on your building site are illegally here?
I wouldn't want to grass them up, mate. It's not.
It's just a number.
No, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't because like, hang on, if I may, so the immigration people might hear it, I might get them into trouble. So I don't think
they're going to know where you are or where you're working, and a lot of people listening are going to start thinking the number might be zero.
Well, there's not. There's probably about, I don't know. For what I don't know how many are illegal because I can't speak. I can only speak English, but there's a few, it's about 15, I think. Okay,
and you don't know whether they're legal or illegal.
I know at least 7 or 8 of them are.
And
I think because I tell you how I know, because
that's half.
I did,
isn't it? So what would be for you?
Yeah.
And thank you for being polite, because things can sometimes get a bit heated in these issues.
Yeah,
I respect you for that.
You don't need to be rude, is there?
No, exactly. Well, sometimes there is, actually. I think we can both agree about that, but this is not one of those times.
All right.
What would be good news for you? So a record-breaking reduction in net migration, laws already in place, which is, I mean, I'd say this politely again, in direct contravention of what you thought. I mean, the system brought in, and I don't like this system, but it speaks directly to what you've described. Unskilled workers can't come in anymore. It is literally impossible for them to get visas. So the phenomenon you describe has been directly attacked, directly dealt with. If there are people on your building site, and we'll have to take your word for it, then obviously your employer is breaking the law. You're probably complicit in illegality. If you know for a fact that they're there illegally, they won't be insured, which means that whoever is responsible for running the site in the event of an accident or something like that could end up in court or in jail. You know that health and safety legislation in this country is widely regarded as being quite robust. So I'm somewhat surprised to hear that on a massive site you've got that level of law breaking and health and safety breaches going on. But even if it is going on, and there's a few people suggesting that perhaps it isn't, and if it is, why are you protecting them? But we'll leave that for now. If there are people here doing what you described, they arrived before the rules that have been brought in and delivered the news that we're discussing today.
They possibly could have done. I mean, they possibly...
No, they must have done. Well, not must have done, but they are much more likely to have done than they would be before the rules were brought in. So I just want to know, what news would make you happy on a day like today?
A news would make me happy would be, people, immigrants can come in as long as they're willing to work.
Yeah, that's what's happened.
as long as they're willing. See, this is the thing. You see, you're really good at talking, mate.
You can't keep saying that, Lewis. That's not fair.
It's true. It's like you see, like it's like trying to talk to a barrister or a politician.
No, it's not. It's trying to talk to someone who's got the facts and figures in front of him, which are available to absolutely everybody. So, what would be good news for you today? Wow. Good news for you today would be you can only really come here if you're going to work, and that is what has happened. That is one of the main reasons why figures. If you're going to work, if you're going to pay. So that's what's happened today. So that makes today good news. What else?
Okay, so if you're going to, all right then. So you see, this is the difficulty because you said a lot of things very quickly. Now I can't.
I just ask people very respectfully to explain the thinking behind their opinions, Lewis.
Well, the thinking is that I'm a working class person. I'm trying to earn a living to the best of my ability, and what you're saying, I suppose in theory is correct, but it isn't.
It's not how you feel. Reality. It's not how you feel.
Not how I feel.
No, I know. It doesn't matter whether it's true or not. It's not how you feel. And a reduction of 50% in the overall numbers is not, I think, we've got to go, I'm late for the news. This isn't going to change how you feel about things, including your colleagues who may or may not be here illegally. Thank you, mate. I do respect your honesty, and I mean that. I hope that doesn't sound insincere. Thomas Watts is here with your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
7:38 is the time, and just to drive home that point about it being the responsibility of good journalists to give people, whatever social class they identify as being in, the information they need to have informed opinions. The current salaries, I think, for skilled worker visas put joiners on just shy of £31,000, ditto bricklayers, electricians about £5,000 more, plasterers smack in between the two, and roofers just shy of £31,000. So, as Craig and many others of you who work in the construction industry point out, nobody is getting undercut. I thought that Lewis's appeal to politeness was helpful. You can have polite conversations even as you disagree, but Adam in Leytonstone chooses to describe it as talking rubbish, which is fair enough. I think that's relatively polite. I'm an electrician working on site in London. There's plenty of work. We need people. No employer I've had would take on illegal workers. It wouldn't be worth the risk when there's so many legitimate people looking for work. I'm working class. I've never worried about immigration, legal or illegal, taking my job. You can only come here if you're willing to work, but you can't come here if you're going to take a job. A few of you are questioning the logic of that particular position, and Andy reminds us that the employer has a duty to check every employee's right to work in the UK. No immigrant has stolen anyone's job. The employer chose to break the law. And Sheena also picks up on the idea of complaining that people aren't coming here to work while also complaining that they are coming here to work. And it's very helpful to hear that in the flesh, isn't it, in the wild? Because that's why I ask the question, will these numbers matter? Will somebody who feels that they are being squeezed, that people are pushing in front of them in the queue, and has a strong sense that is what is going on around him, and doesn't. It's something quite nice about not wanting to grass people up. If that was true, a sort of solidarity that would be absolutely beautiful if it applied in all areas of life as well. If you sort of thought you've got as much right to be here as I have in this job, is the same sort of solidarity as not wanting to grass somebody up. But I guess that is why I'm not as optimistic as some of you are that this statistical release today, these figures released today, will change anything. They certainly haven't changed Lewis's mind. But maybe I did. I don't know. 10:41 is the time. Alistair's in Stowe. Alistair, what would you like to say?
Good morning, James. First of all, two apologies. One, I haven't listened to all of your programme today.
What?
And secondly, I might have to leave the line because I'm in a coronary care unit where the consultant is due to come here. But if you're interested...
Are you all right? Are you all right?
They don't really know. But what I'd just like to give you is an insight into my observations of what has gone on in the last 9 days from A&E for a condition that I didn't even know I had, and the link to immigration. Now we know that lots of people believe that immigrants are a drain on the system. What I've actually seen in this hospital, which is on the edge of a Wiltshire town, which has got quite a large immigrant population.
Yes.
And excuse me if I get some of the phrases a little bit wrong and are politically incorrect.
Alistair, I'm not going to pick a fight with a man in his hospital bed waiting for the consultant to come and talk to him about a condition he's only just discovered he's had. So you fill your boots, my friend.
Right. So in A&E, we were in there for around, on and off, for around about 4.5 to 5 hours. The care was extremely good. What I would say is there was never less than around about 50 people waiting to be treated. And during the whole time that I was in the A&E and the emergency department, I would say that the balance of staff was probably 85 to 90% with some sort of ethnic background. Obviously, I didn't go around asking if they were born in this country.
Of course.
But more importantly, in the whole time that we were there, we only saw 2 or maybe 3 at the most people who were from an ethnic background actually using the service itself. Okay, so that allays some of the fears that these people that lots of our right-wing colleagues don't want here are not necessarily a drain on the service. What I've then seen since I became an inpatient, hopefully only for one day, but now in the 9th day, is that the balance on the ward is exactly the same. No, not exactly the same. Probably about 75% of the staff are of ethnic background, and not a single person who is being treated in this acute cardiac ward is from an ethnic background. They're all white British people.
And of course, just to qualify a couple of things without wanting to be responsible for your heart rate or your blood pressure in any way, shape or form.
Heart rate needs to come up a little bit.
Okay, well, you've come to the right place, Alistair. Because, of course, if the people who are currently in the white coats and the nurses' uniforms were to fall ill, they would have every right to be in the beds that you describe. And yet what you address is the sort of myth of exploitation. I just wanted to clarify, you're not for a minute suggesting that one taxpayer has more right to NHS services than another taxpayer.
Not one little bit. The myth of exploitation is a really good phrase, because the people that believe that the people that are coming to this country are nothing but a drain is absolutely what I've seen has been a real eye-opener in the last 10 days.
And listen, there will be hospitals in other parts of the country where the demographics are very different, but the central thrust of the point you make is that people are people, and some are doing good for us and some are not. Some need help and some provide it. And to start distinguishing too much about where and when they come from is what leads us to many of the messes that we're in at the moment. I'm worried about you now. I don't know whether I should keep you on the line till the consultant turns up, but that just so you don't start stewing in your own thoughts.
No, James. There's no chance of that. I'll carry on listening to things.
Excellent.
But I just thought this was an ideal opportunity to put some of the records straight on what I'm seeing, and that's why I made the point that the hospital is actually on the outskirts of a town.
Yes, you did.
That has got quite a high level of immigration, and I'm still not seeing a high level of immigrants, for want of a better word, actually using the service itself. All they're doing is contributing to it.
And your recent migrant is, of course, likely to be more younger and therefore less in need of health. I wish you the very best, Alistair. I really do. I hope everything goes tickety-boo in the rest of the day. All right, mate.
Yeah, cheers.
You stay safe. God bless. 10:46 is the time. And that, of course, is why some people use the word fighting age instead of working age. At first glance, it's such a weird thing to say. That's a fighting age, but you hate people who come here to use the NHS and to need services and need looking after. So surely working age is a good thing, right? You can't get a working visa if you're not working age. No, fighting age. That fighting age. People that don't want to take up arms for either ISIS or the Syrian army. They're fighting age. They should stay in Syria and choose between ISIS and Bashar al-Assad. Anyway, that's possibly a digression too far. 10:47 is the time. If you're just joining us, the difference between the number of people moving to the UK and leaving the country is estimated to have halved. The biggest fall in net migration since the pandemic, the biggest percentage fall, I think, on record. Long-term immigration fell below 1 million for the first time in around 3 years, but the number of people leaving the country, and that might be a phone-in tomorrow, brings the net figure down to the lowest it has been in a long time. But will it make any difference to anything? Answer, yes and no so far. Yes and no. 10:47 is the time.
James O'Brien on LBC.
10:50 is the time, and the numbers are in. We could play a game. I should do things a little bit differently on the days where I'm bringing you probably the first sniff you've had of a story that will be absolutely everywhere tomorrow. The Labour government have done a great job this morning on the Justice Review, on David Gauke's Justice Review, because they've got ahead. Do you know what I did this morning? I was looking at circulation figures for newspapers, because I've noticed recently I've gone back to leaning quite heavily on them to decide what to talk about. They are negligible. I don't think there's a newspaper in this country that sells more copies than we have listeners every week. Well, I suppose their figures are daily. So the overall totals of readers versus listeners, they're not even close to where we are. But who pays more attention? Why don't they do a review of what happened on James O'Brien's programme on Sky News instead of a review of what's in the Daily Mail? Because there's a hell of a lot more people listening to this than there are reading the Daily Mail. But hey-ho, on we go. I looked up the circulation figures and they are absolutely negligible. So rather than worrying about how things have always been, perhaps it's time to think about how things could be. So how do you think, because I don't think they will have done it yet, how do you think the media outlets that are responsible for bringing you Brexit, responsible for bringing you Boris Johnson, responsible for bringing you Liz Truss's budget, responsible for bringing you austerity, the people that brought you, don't blame the bankers, blame the libraries. Who do you think that the media outlets who have reduced this country to rhetorical rubble in many ways, how do you think they're going to spin the immigration figures? Because one of the great ways that they've done all of the damage that they've done is by trying to blame it all on immigrants. And again, with love, Lewis in Liverpool showed us earlier exactly what that sounds like. It's all their fault. That's why I'm not earning as much as I should be earning. It's their fault. And it's worked brilliantly. And it propelled all of the things that I've just described to you. So how are they going to spin the biggest fall ever? To start off, you can text me 84850 if you want, or WhatsApp me on 03456060973. And if the quality is high enough, we may throw open the phone lines to that, and then we can tick them off tomorrow when they actually happen. So I think fairly obviously, some people are going to say they don't believe it. Some people are going to say, oh, it doesn't matter because we don't know how many illegals there are. Some people are going to say, well, it's a bad thing anyway because there's still too many. But of course, what nobody in that category is going to say is, all right, I'm half as angry as I was yesterday. The problem is now if you believe it's a problem, it's now half as big as it was yesterday. 10:53 is the time. Matthew is in Coventry. Matthew, will the numbers matter?
Yes, morning to you.
So firstly, I'd like to say and apologise. I was one of those people that was spun something and I was fed. Like if I listened to, for instance, John Gaunt back in the day, I listened to his radio station. I believed everything he said.
I don't really know
now,
who
the
you're talking about. Was he? He's not the concrete bloke, is he? The fellow that says you can blow concrete?
He was a sports chap originally, I think, on one of the stations.
Okay. So a traditional radio phone-in where everybody rings in to say how awful immigration is.
I used to listen to him, and I believe he said, but on this topic at the moment, I was one of those people where I picked up the paper like the Daily Mail and read the numbers. I've done my research, and I'm so ashamed that I didn't actually know what, because I've researched, and I'm actually thinking, Jesus Christ, I'm so ashamed. I've left now one party who I actually believed in. I hate liars, and that's caused me now to actually totally do a 360 and 180. Go another way. In the sense that...
180?
180, sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. I mean, if you did a 360, you'd be facing in exactly the same direction that you were facing in before.
I have one question to you, and this is quite an important question. LBC used to have a very nice chap called Theo. Why did he jump sides to MGB News that tells lies? That's one question I'd like to answer, please, sir.
I don't think Theo has ever told any lies. And
he jumped ship.
Well, he didn't jump ship. He did explain at the time, and you put me in a mildly awkward situation, but he had quite a lot going on at home that meant that he wasn't able to commit to the graft and grind of being LBC's political editor. But he's a very amenable and a very good friend of mine, and I'm sure he'd be happy to answer those questions yourself. You'll be able to find him on social media. But as is often the case when people leave LBC, I can assure you that there is absolutely no hidden agenda, conspiracy, or secret in play. Do you think that the numbers will matter in the context of what has been announced today?
It will matter
in the
to
great
the
scheme of things.
Spin it. Yes, it'll matter to the people like Reform and people. It'll be good. It'll be a situation for Mr. Farage now to say, "Oh, we've got to now change. We have to do something else to, change the narrative," because as you can see, and I can see now, that the truth is coming out. And for hardworking people, such as yourself and myself that pays taxes, I'd rather have immigrants work hard than our own benefits people that aren't, if you know what I mean.
Well, it's not either or, and you move from one right-wing trope to another, blaming people on unemployment benefit for problems that you used to blame immigrants for, but so maybe not quite 180, let's say 90 degrees perhaps, Matthew, but there it is. Thank you. That idea that these numbers will have to be fudged, they'll have to be denied, they'll have to be manipulated, they'll have to be denigrated, or of course you simply say, well, why didn't they reduce it to zero? I don't know if you remember, I used to refer quite often, there's a scene in King Lear that I love, and I think I love it because it speaks so, as Shakespeare often does when he's at his absolute peak. It speaks to human nature, and for good or for ill, it speaks to human nature so directly. So they're trying to persuade Lear that he doesn't need a retinue. He's given away his country, and with his country, even though he gave it to his own daughters, he's given away his dignity. He didn't realise that at the time, and he's given away all his status. And he is flitting between two courts, between the courts of his two daughters, Goneril and Regan, and they don't really like him. They don't want him around. They've got what they needed from him. And they hate the fact that they have to pay for his retinue of courtiers and soldiers to eat and drink and sleep and provide them with hospitality. So they start almost a Dutch auction. One of them says, you can't stay with me anymore unless you get rid of 50 of your retinue. And so he goes, right, I'll stay with my other daughter then. And she says, oh, actually, I don't think you, I don't really think you need more than 20, Dad. And he goes, right, well, 50's better than 20. I'll stay with my other daughter then. I'm paraphrasing slightly, and I'm certainly not doing iambic pentameters. And of course, the one who originally said 50 now says, well, actually, do you know what? My old sister might have a point there. How about 10? 10 seems reasonable. And then one of them, and I can never remember whether it's Goneril or Regan, one of them says, what need one? And that's what happens in these sort of situations. Well, I'm sorry, it's not zero. Yeah, but it's half of what you were angry about yesterday. Yeah, but it's still not zero. Imagine what would happen if it was zero. Imagine what Alistair's experience in hospital this morning would be like if it was zero. It'd be extraordinary, wouldn't it? Absolutely extraordinary. It's coming up to 10:59. We may continue with this because it is obviously the biggest. Well, not the biggest. There's loads going on. We need to reflect upon this justice review as well. And yesterday's story where it became crystal clear that the Labour government is preparing to reverse elements of the winter fuel payment. I mean, on a normal day, all of those would be contending for the 10 o'clock slot. But it is also Thursday, which means that Mystery Hour is on the way at 12 noon. A little look at some of the texts that have come in. It has often amazed me, writes Martin, in God's own country of Kidderminster, that newspapers still wield so much influence with the rest of the media, considering they are increasingly irrelevant. If you factor in the websites, Martin, they're not quite as irrelevant as the circulation figures make them look. But he tells me he saw a BBC news topic this morning quoting a Tufton Street think tank. Outlets like the BBC need to stop quoting from these think tanks without explaining how they operate. Until then, the dial will never move. And someone should write a book about that, but you're absolutely right. One of the reasons why these numbers may not make any difference to anything is because of the epic effort put into stoking feelings over facts by, well, pretty much everyone.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 3 minutes after 11. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. That was a great hour, that. Thank you. I enjoyed that conversation a lot. I'm not sure that we made enormous amounts of progress on the question of whether migration figures will actually cut any mustard with people who profess to be obsessed about migration figures. That's how I should have phrased the question. I told you it was tricky when things drop shortly before the show starts, and I changed my plans accordingly. Will people who profess to be obsessed with migration figures care about the massive drop in migration figures? I'd say the answer was, well, the obvious suspects won't, and they will bend over backwards to turn the story into something completely different. But those of us who care about facts and honesty, perhaps, won't need to change our position. So who is caught between those two stools? We shall have to see. 4 minutes after 11 is the time. Complete change of pace now. Here's a headline that you've probably heard this morning. Paedophiles set to face chemical castration. This is the United Kingdom in 2025. Paedophiles set to face chemical castration. Be honest. Your visceral reaction to that, your gut reaction to that is good. Well, actually, I can't put words in your mouth. That wouldn't be fair. I say bring it on. My initial, immediate reaction to it is bring it on. And I will be extremely surprised if that is not my position at 12 noon today. Extremely surprised. But I don't like doing programs where everybody rings in to essentially take a bite out of the same apple. Because there will be good reasons for objecting to this. Most obviously, perhaps, the idea that it's a form of life sentence. But so what? It is language that doesn't feel very British. Nonsense. It punishes one type of criminal more than another type. Why, for example, would paedophiles face chemical castration but rapists would not? That's quite a good question, actually. Because, of course, you could answer it by saying, well, they should too. Chemical castration is used to manage sex offenders in other European countries. I didn't know that. Did you know that? So Germany, France, Sweden, Poland, Denmark. In most countries, it's voluntary. But in Poland and some states in the United States, it's mandatory, which may not be a big enough constituency for me to ask you your personal experiences of it. You know, whether you know someone to whom it's happened, whether it has actually happened to you. The fact that people take it up voluntarily suggests that it does the offenders a favour too. It is, I presume, a crime that many culprits hate themselves for committing. Not all, but I have to presume that many culprits will hate themselves for committing a crime like this. And as for the rest of us, we feel a more visceral disgust and fury at the sexual abuse of children than we do at the sexual abuse of adults. And I don't think there's anything particularly unreasonable about that. I would probably struggle to explain why. It's an issue of vulnerability, it's an issue of care, but all of those could also apply to the sexual abuse of adults. So think of it as a graph. So you care deeply about people being raped, but you care even more about those people when they're children. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's chemical castration. I want to make that absolutely clear. Chemical castration. So it's in many ways, it's an unfortunate juxtaposition of words because the presence of the word castration makes you think about scissors. And it is categorically not like that. It is essentially drugs that will do two things. They will limit your invasive sexual thoughts, and they will reduce your testosterone and limit libido. So they will reduce your desires. They will dilute your desires, and they will limit your urges, reduce your urges. They will dilute your desires and reduce your urges. And if your mind is such that your desires and your urges are about children, then I imagine that you might welcome the opportunity to have them both switched off. The only reason why you wouldn't want to do that is because you intended to continue to offend, which is why I think that I'm okay with it being mandatory. I think I am. Listen, feelings, heart, not head, bring it in. Do it now. Okay? Then intellect, head kicks in. Well, and again you say, well, what if people are falsely accused? And you say, well, then they stop taking the tablets when it's proved that they haven't committed the crime that they've been convicted of. That's fine. So I presume it's reversible. It must be reversible because you'd have to continue the programme indefinitely. And psychiatric work takes place alongside that targets other causes of sexual offending, such as a desire for power. And that is the thing, isn't it, often, particularly about rape, that it is not really about sexual desire. It's got more to do with an exercise of power, of dominance. But if it is the case that it works, and research, though limited, shows considerable reductions in reoffending rates. There's one study that followed 10 offenders, none of whom reoffended after treatment. Another study paired one group with offenders who were chemically castrated and another who had not. Among those chemically castrated, the reoffending rates were 60% lower. If you made it mandatory, you'd need legal and medical convention to be overturned. So doctors will have something interesting to say about this. 0345 6060 973. Doctors are already being asked to consider the possibility of helping people end their own lives, and now they're being asked to consider the possibility of helping the state chemically castrate people who don't necessarily want to be chemically castrated. Well, no necessarily about it. If it's going to be mandatory, then you get no choice. So you'd need that. It's David Gork who's come up with this, and he wrote in his review that, quotes, gaining valid informed consent to a course of treatment is a key tenet of medical law and ethics in England and Wales. So you would have to change that if you were to make chemical castration mandatory. Would you like to hear what he had to say on this subject? It was only a relatively small part of the conversation that he had with Nick earlier, but I think it probably merits repeating.
There is currently a pilot in place in the southwest of England for chemical suppressants. It is a voluntary arrangement. It is focused on some sexual offenders. I don't think this is the right answer for many sexual offenders, but for some who have got sexual desires that they actively want to suppress.
Well, the Sun suggests it's paedophiles you would be looking at.
Well,
is that correct?
For example, yes.
Right.
And I mean, I was talking to a friend who works in this area who knows of cases where you had offenders who desperate to rid themselves of these desires and were very keen to be able to take chemical suppressants to try to reduce those urges. And what we argue for in this report is that we build up the evidence base, that we continue that pilot. But what we are looking at, what we are recommending is a voluntary arrangements, and as I say, particularly targeted. This is used elsewhere. We've looked at international evidence on a whole range of things. All we're saying here is that we should look at it.
So if I use myself as an example, I'm taking it on trust, or it is administered to me by an NHS clinic, whatever the drug is, or how does it work?
Yes, so it's administered.
So I know the system knows I've had my injection.
But this is all
oral. How is? I don't even know how it's done.
I think it's an injection,
right,
as I understand it. But look, I think this is one where we want to build up the evidence. And let's be clear, this is not a solution to most sex offenders, but it could play a role in reducing risk.
I think it might be an implant, actually. Listen, headlines are headlines, and this one is going to jump out from David Gauke's sentencing review like a frog from a bucket. But I mean, you're telling me that it's more likely to be an implant. Someone will know more about this than I do. That is absolutely guaranteed. Not every day, but on this subject, I can give you a 100% guarantee someone listening to this will know a lot more about this than I do. Some people might have been involved even in the pilot scheme or in similar practices overseas. I think the key word is mandatory, right? Because presumably you could access this kind of treatment voluntarily anyway. It might involve a bit of a struggle. And of course, even if you were to seek it voluntarily, you'd be telling whoever you were seeking it from that you had paedophilic tendencies. So no, I guess the voluntary element, although technically possible, is unlikely to play much of a part in the process. It's the use of the word mandatory, isn't it? I want to know what you think about that. Mandatory chemical castration for not just paedophiles, perhaps, listening to David Gauke, but for sex offenders. I know that I should come up with some objections to it. I know that I should sort of be open to the possibility of repentance or the possibility of changing, the possibility of becoming somebody different. It's a crucial part of Christian doctrine, isn't it? You confess your sins in my religion and you are forgiven for them, and you walk out of the confessional box with a relatively clean slate. Well, not with this you don't, because all of your sexual desires, all of your sexual urges would be diminished, diluted or disappeared. And yet at 11:15 this morning, I'm supremely comfortable with that. I wonder whether I should be. I didn't think I'd get much Idiot's Corner on this topic because it's A, a little bit unexpected, and B, quite a weird one, right? But Tracy has absolutely steamed into the enclosure with this text. She writes, "I bet people of certain faiths will use human rights to get out of the injections." We talked a little bit in the first hour about what right-wing media can do to human beings. But there is Tracy, absolutely smashing it out of the park. They're going to use human rights to get out of the injections. And I always, as you know these days, when I get a contribution of particular idiocy, I always like to have a look at what other opinions the person who has sent them in holds. And it turns out she's a big fan of the woman who publicly called for a pogrom. Which again is something that right-wing media is pushing very, very hard at the moment. It's okay if you publicly call for a pogrom as long as it's asylum seekers that you want to be burned to death in their beds and not, for example, people called Tracy.
James O'Brien on LBC.
I don't think we've ever failed yet, have we, to have an intelligent conversation about something that is outwardly pretty black and white, even perhaps a little bit red meat flavoured. I presume today will prove to be no exception, but a lot of people already pointing out that rape, I don't know. I'm not a psychologist, and it's not an area I like to read about because it makes me feel grim. But I don't know whether the proclivities of a paedophile are comparable to the proclivities of an adult rapist, someone who rapes adults. I actually don't know. I do know that chemical castration, I do know that rape is about power. It's been pretty reliably demonstrated, as Emma writes. So this is entirely performative politics. But again, if it removes your ability to commit the offence, then the motivation for committing the offence doesn't really matter, because it doesn't just dilute urges, it dilutes desire. It dilutes your ability to be aroused by whatever it is you're getting aroused by, whether it's the exercise of power or whether it's a sexual attraction to children. So I don't know, is the short answer. And I think I like it. And I'm going to use the word like. I certainly think I approve, but I also think I like it. There are two types of paedophiles, I suppose. There are those who hate themselves and those who don't. And making it mandatory means that those who don't hate themselves cannot escape the net once they have been caught, and those who do hate themselves, I think, would welcome it. I did get that call once, Quite an extraordinary moment, and it was when the audience was about half the size of what it is now, which makes it an even harder moment to reach from somebody who has the urges, has the desires, but doesn't act upon them. I suspect he would welcome this. One of my best friends played that character in Casualty or Holby City. I can never remember which one. He played a man who was feeling these urges, these desires I think it was about his own niece, and he hated them. And so he told someone, and his brother-in-law found out, and his brother-in-law kicked his head in, which is why he ended up in A&E. So I don't know if you'd feel like ringing me today, but if you would really love this, because it would stop you it would help you deal with the part of you that you despise but can't control, then I'd love to hear your thoughts as well on 03456060973. I'll be with you imminently. Rebecca and Barry are up first. There's one phone line free if you're quick on 03456060973. But I want to read out John's position as well. The idea of chemical castration is utterly barbaric. You bring in a policy like that for child abusers, but what would stop a future government from applying it to other convictions? First it would be rape, and then it would be marital rape, all of which are disgusting. Please don't confuse me here. But then eventually we might be recriminalising homosexuality and chemically castrating the next Alan Turing. And then it's not a huge leap from sex offenders to attacking the LGBTQ plus community, especially with some of the knuckle-dragging army of xenophobes and transphobes currently in the ascendancy. Then what, he asks, castrating all the undesirables in our society? Someone mentioned Alan Turing earlier in a text, and I nearly bit, and I would have been an idiot if I had bitten. Because, of course, if society decides that homosexuality is as repellent as paedophilia, then gay people start getting chemically castrated, as happened to Alan Turing. And I would once have said, we've come on from those days, we're better than that, but then I'd need to remind you who's in the White House and who's currently leading many opinion polls in this country. Gosh, that's food for thought. Thank you, John. I really appreciate that. Rebecca is in Sunbury. Rebecca, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello.
I don't think it's barbaric. I think it's appropriate. However, chemical castration would be assuming that the paedophile is coming from a place of sexual urges, so it's hormone-driven, which would work for those people. But what about all of the people that are just pure evil, that are not doing it for sexual pleasures, but are doing it to prey on those that are vulnerable, which are predominantly children? Children and women.
I mean, I don't want to go into graphic detail about what it is they would or would not be doing, but this would remove the physical ability to be aroused. So you can't stop people from hurting people, but you can stop them from doing certain things. And also, I mean, if I've understood your point correctly, so what? It's better to take out half of the problem than none of it.
Well, yes, to a degree, but if this is going to be taxpayers' money funding this, should we not look at the problem on a whole and look at the solution on a whole?
Yeah, I mean, we have. I don't quite recognise the point that you're making in the context of pure evil. I mean, if people want to hurt children, then they don't need to be sexually aroused to do it, do they? So we're dealing with paedophiles who do have sexual feelings towards children, and we're going to give them drugs that remove them.
I just don't think it's the right solution, really. And also,
you said you did when you came on.
No. What I was my point was, in answer to the person that texted you, it's not barbaric, because what's barbaric is what those people do to the children, and those children are left with trauma for the rest of their life.
Absolutely,
that's barbaric.
So what's wrong with chemically castrating them then?
Chemically castrating them, there's a lot of people that would still continue to do those things to children, and there's a lot of ways that you can
chemically castrated.
offend children.
Yeah, but we're getting rid of the biggest way. Why would I mean it's I hope I'm not misunderstanding you, but you don't sort of say there's no point punishing them over there, because that punishment wouldn't fit them over there doing something completely different.
I just don't think that we should be looking at how we can target all of the paedophiles, and I don't have the solution to everyone.
Okay.
But I just think it's another it's a small win. It might not work for everyone, and then we're back with still a major problem.
The reoffending rates were 60% lower when they were compared with people who hadn't been chemically castrated, and in one study where they followed 10 offenders, none of them reoffended. Not one, really.
Yeah. And they were allowed to go on and lead a normal life, were they incarcerated?
No, they would have to be at large in order to face the possibility of reoffending. It's hard to reoffend in prison, particularly with a crime like this. So anyway, I think I take your point. I don't have to agree with it, do I? Any more than you have to agree with me. But the idea of not punishing people doing one disgusting thing, because we'd have to find a different way of punishing people doing a completely different disgusting thing, seems perhaps a little odd to me. I don't want to use the perfect being the enemy of the good, but that record there in that one element of research, which has a 100% success rate, that is perfect in statistical terms. Thank you, Rebecca. Barry's in Edgware. Barry, what made you pick up the phone?
Hello, James. It's been a long time, couple of years.
Well, I've missed you. I've missed you, Barry.
Yeah.
Go on.
Yeah, life on Mars, wasn't it?
Isn't it?
With Boris. I have a Goselerin injection, an implant in my stomach every 3 months because I've got an advanced prostate cancer.
Okay.
And I had it 3 years ago. It started because my testosterone was raging.
Yes.
And it was like my PSA went up to 3,800. I was basically dying. And also that gave me a really, really active sex life, even though I was 74.
So the cancer caused the testosterone to go up?
Yeah, it does. The testosterone feeds the cancer.
I didn't know that. Crikey. Yeah, and it reflects on your libido. Yeah,
because it makes it really high. Obviously, if
I get it. I just didn't know it. I hope I don't sound stupid. This is all news to me.
Yeah, I had a partner 30 years younger than me.
Yeah, all right, Barry, mate. And no one likes to show off.
You're jumping out of cars, shouting at people.
Oh, I see. Oh, crikey. So not only were you horny, for want of a better word, but you were also pretty angry.
Yeah, so here we are 2.5 years down the line. I mean, the side effects I was told was erectile dysfunction.
Right.
But after about 3 weeks now, I can't remember what it was like to have a sexual desire. I have no desires whatsoever. It's completely changed my personality. It's blissful. It's peaceful. I can't remember what that was like.
Wow.
It's a personality change. So I thought for a long time, if I was a sex offender, I've worked with sex offenders when I worked for the National AIDS Trust, Terence Higgins Trust. I worked in Woodhill as a probation officer. Gosh. When you go into some of these cells, the first thing you notice is that people, they keep catalogues of Littlewoods and catalogues because they look at the photos of children and cut them out and fantasize. But they don't want to be like that.
Right.
They want to be normal. But they
would welcome, if we think of it as a switch, and your switch got flicked, they would actually welcome it.
One of the things I did as well as a professional, I sat on a sex offenders course. I was invited, and one of the things they ask you to do is close your eyes and think of the worst thing you've ever done in your life you haven't told anybody for 5 minutes, and then open them, and then that's it. But of course, the immediate fear is that you're going to be asked by the shooter, what was it you were thinking? And then you get some idea of what it's like for some of these men to have these awful thoughts that they have to then talk about in therapy, trying to get released from prison.
Good grief.
But I would identify now as asexual.
Right.
I mean, the word chemical castration is awful, but that's exactly what's happened to me. It's a little prick, if you pardon the expression, in the stomach.
Stop it. Yes.
Every 3 months.
Right.
You get just a prick, and it's an implant. I think they're about 900 quid. They're quite expensive, but
but it's a small price to pay in the context of what we're talking about. Crikey, I take some calls, Barry, but this is a memorable one. And part of the reason you welcome it so much is partly linked to your age.
Yeah, but
you wouldn't have fancied this in your 20s, would you, or your 30s? And of course, we should stress your appetites were entirely healthy.
Insatiable, mine were. I've had therapy, and I've realised I had an insatiable sexual appetite because I've obviously always had a lot of testosterone.
Yeah, okay.
But now
so naturally high levels that then got turbocharged by the illness.
I'm now into intermittent fasting. I've lost weight. I'm in the gym all the time. I'm back into my Buddhism, meditation. I don't have that other thing. When I'm with people, I don't think, would I fancy him or not? Would I? I have no sexual desires whatsoever. And it's hard to explain to someone that doesn't. You obviously had them.
Right.
To never have them. I mean,
yes.
I never ever have them anymore. And I can't remember what that was like.
You sound absolutely liberated.
Blissful.
Peaceful. What an extraordinary word. I love you, mate. I really do. That is one of the
Thanks
most...
a lot, James.
No, don't go yet, because I'm about to compare you to Rupert Everett. Has anyone ever compared you to Rupert Everett before?
No, but I'd like to... I do identify with him. At one time, you would compare me to Gene Hunt on Life on Mars.
It's not going badly, is it? That's the story you're telling, from Gene Hunt to Rupert Everett. So Rupert Everett, I read an interview with him once when he talked about reaching an age where he wasn't constantly interested in sex. It was with him, it was just the natural passage of time. But he said it was it was like an enormous burden being lifted from his shoulders. He could actually enjoy social events and parties without wondering who he was going to try and pull or anything like that.
Yeah,
you've had a very similar experience.
I mean, Buddhist monks aspire to this for all their life, to reach this point of suppressing
enlightenment.
their sexual...
Enlightenment.
Because because it's such a powerful urge, your libido, once you've suppressed it, it goes into other things. You start thinking on a different plane.
This is incredible. When's your first volume of philosophy being published?
I've often been asked that.
I bet you have. That is such an incredible call. I mean, is the treatment going well? Otherwise, are you okay? I mean,
my PSA's 1 now. It's never gone above 1.5, and I say at 3,860, as you probably know, PSA it was exploding. It was the highest my oncologist has ever seen. I go every 3 months to have a checkup, but I'm doing okay. I'm got I've lost weight. I'm in the gym.
Listen, you couldn't be better qualified to have made this call. Oddly, given that you're, as we've stressed repeatedly,
I am that person.
Well, here it is then.
I'm Ray Liotta, and you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. If you build it, they will come.
Or not, Barry, as the case may be.
Absolutely.
Have a great day. Here's Thomas Watts with your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
34 is the time. Anthony writes, James, that last call was the best I have ever heard on the radio. Alex writes, I think I could actually hear you at the start of the news saying absolutely extraordinary. David says, I'm listening to your caller who has prostate cancer and I can confirm everything he said. And Sean has sent me a joke that is a little bit Bernard Manning, mate, but I just want you to know that I have read it. I hope this call gets put on social, says Ian. I've often thought that society treats people who have sexual attraction to children horribly before they even commit a crime. How would you know where to get help or what options there are? Hearing that call could be life-changing for them. And actually not just Sean, quite a few of you. Listen, I'm a woke snowflake. I don't want to hear your jokes that denigrate your own wives. So stop sending them to me. 11:35 is the time. The question is pretty straightforward. Mandatory chemical castration for sex offenders, most obviously, or initially paedophiles. What do we think? Maggie is in Muswell Hill. Maggie, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello,
I just
Maggie.
wanted to share some thoughts based on my experience working very closely with people who are in prison and sex offenders. And one of the biggest challenges we've seen is helping them reintegrate into society.
Yeah.
So finding stable housing, finding employability. It's really difficult, largely due to public fear and concerns about reoffending.
Of course.
Same with employment. So someone like James Timpson, he does not employ sex offenders. And because of this, I think there is value in exploring the use of voluntary chemical castration.
Voluntary?
I think so, because
Okay.
it needs to be part of a structured rehabilitation program, especially for high-risk individuals. And it's not a solution for every case, But in certain situations, I think it could potentially
What do we
help.
think? You know much more about this than I do, but it may be too speculative a question for you to answer. What do we think that might be, percentage-wise? So, if I put 100 child sex offenders, paedophiles in a room and asked how many of you would like to have voluntarily the kind of treatment that Barry just described, which will, as he described it quite beautifully, actually, as a liberation from perfectly healthy appetites. So imagine how welcome a liberation from disgusting and unhealthy appetites might be. What percentage do you think would sign up for it?
I just don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I think I'd like to say that the majority of people want to help, and I suppose the people that we're working with really do want to rehabilitate into society. So
they would probably all welcome it.
Yeah, I think they would.
Why? What's the problem with mandatory?
So difficult.
Yeah, no, I mean, you've made that point brilliantly, and everyone's going to nod along, whatever the views they may have on other elements of this subject. But people will say, well, I don't want you in society, but that proves the point that you're making. But why not mandatory?
Because I think of the ethical complexities around
easy for you to say
medical impact. Yeah, I think you can't force these things onto people, so it has to be carefully managed by qualified professionals. I think it's a really good conversation that's
being started by David Gore. Yeah, I think I do too. It's and I guess the mandatory bit is where the whiff of red meat comes in, maybe. Because they gave the story to The Sun. It's the front page of The Sun today. That would have been a very deliberate. I think the communications on this have been absolutely fantastic. The best I can remember with a big government policy announcement. But that, of course, might involve some cynicism, and mandatory appeals to a very different sensibility than the one you're describing. Yours comes from a desire to see these men reintegrate into society and cease to be a threat to children. The mandatory...
and it's not just men, James, it's women as well.
Okay. Well, that makes the point, doesn't it, about reducing one element of desire, not actually reducing the capacity to commit crimes. Mm-hmm. And it would be the sexual sadists who refused to take it, and they wouldn't. It wouldn't remove their desire to hurt people. It would just remove their ability to do some of the things that they might have otherwise been minded to do.
Yeah, 100%.
Thank you.
And I actually think that the people that we work with want to rehabilitate into society. So those people would be the ones that should be maybe involved in this voluntary or mandatory, I don't know how you'd word it, castration or chemical castration. I think it would be life-changing for them.
Yes, I do. I mean, we may find out. And of course, it has worked in other countries. Although the studies, I think, are far from comprehensive or definitive, which reminds me, Mystery Hours on the way at 12. They are broadly encouraging. And many other countries have introduced it with measured success, albeit that the mandatory element of it, as far as I can tell, is confined to Poland and some US states. This is the kind of text that I nearly bit at earlier. And Kate's written, hi, James, about chemical castration, 2 words, Alan Turing. And I'm glad I didn't, but Kate obviously didn't hear me explain why. The idea of it being a slippery slope is valid, but if you subscribe entirely to slippery slope theory, not slippery soap theory, that's completely different. If you subscribe entirely to slippery slope theory, then I don't think you ever do anything. So we shouldn't punish these people today in this way, because we might punish completely different people tomorrow in the same way. And that, of course, is strengthened by the fact that we did deploy as a society chemical castration for people, quotes, guilty, end quotes, of the crime of being gay. But I don't know what's the point of being in society if you don't back yourself to stop the bad stuff from happening. And just because the bad stuff happens doesn't mean you can't do the, quotes, good, end quotes stuff, or the desirable stuff. I don't know, but it's certainly not as clear cut as 2 words. Okay, at least I don't think it is. Elizabeth is in Glasgow. Elizabeth, what would you like to say?
Hi, good morning. Hi.
Hello.
I think we're getting to the crux of it here with regard to the fact that chemical castration, mandatory, don't think it's going to cut it voluntary. Don't know how many paedophiles would actually engage with that. The difficulty is that the chemical castration may suppress libido, desire, whatever. It's not going to stop a paedophile who wishes to harm children, abuse children. It doesn't necessarily need to use that part of their anatomy.
No.
That's, in order to harm kids.
No, exactly that. But it addresses all the paedophiles who do.
How many of them will engage with that?
Well, in the studies that are available, one has a 100% success rate and the other has 60% lower reoffending rates among those who had the treatment compared to those who didn't.
Which is good. If there's 100% success rate for one person, excellent.
It was 10 people that study.
10 people, yeah. Right, okay.
So it was 10 out of 10.
My difficulty is the females, what happens with them, the colluders, the collaborators.
But I don't quite understand this, and it must be my fault because you're the second caller to make the point. We'll deal with that next. But what we're dealing with now is an answer to a different question, and you don't answer that question by asking another question, do you?
Not necessarily, but I would be sceptical about the success rate and the number of people that would engage with this. I work in a field.
Well, if it's mandatory,
it's never going to be mandatory, and I don't think that it should be, given the ethics or whatever. People will always.
Well, the proposal is to make it mandatory. The story we're discussing is a government suggestion that it be or David Gauke's, or the government suggestion that it be mandatory. Yeah. So that's what.
And who's going to monitor it? Who's going to police it? Who's going to?
Well, who monitors anything?
We can't. Yeah, at the minute we can't even monitor people. The probation system is so overstretched, over whatever. How are you going to manage this? I work in a field where it's almost an epidemic. Paedophilia, interfamily, stranger. It is an epidemic. And it is every day, every week, there is somebody else. And it is not just that particular person, it is everybody else that is colluding and collaborating. Are we going to chemically castrate them? They won't have been accused of that. There won't be enough evidence. You know what I mean? There's one particular
I do and I don't. I do and I don't. Here we are diluting, diminishing, ideally disappearing the ability of the actual offender to do the disgusting things that they want to do. Great. And now we've got some. Yes,
it could be helpful.
And now we've got some other problems that we're going to have to deal with as well. I don't see how the existence of the other problems removes the rectitude of fixing the first one, or at least trying to.
But we need to know.
Do you think things, in the great scheme of things, would the world you describe be better or worse if paedophiles were being chemically castrated? Would
be better.
Well, there you go.
There may be even better solutions. But who is going to manage that? Who's going to agree to it?
Okay, then let's not. If I were being glib now, I'd say, okay, then let's not even try.
No, I don't mind people trying. It is, I don't think it's ever going to be mandatory. I think it will be
I don't
voluntary,
either, actually.
And there will be people who wish to because they are disgusted and so full of remorse. The majority are not.
Well, I'll take your word for that, and it's your purview. I mean, Barry's worked with prisoners who were simultaneously doing things that the rest of us would find repellent and being repelled by it themselves, wishing that they were not like that. Makes it hard to pin down what the numbers would be, which is why I asked the probation officer earlier what percentage she'd put on the number of offenders who would actually want to sign up for this, and she said she couldn't. I think that's probably a better answer than saying it definitely wouldn't be many of them, but none of us know. None of us know. 11:45 is the time. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where, I mean, if you had told me at 11 o'clock this morning, I'd be dishing out a Ray Liotta during a conversation about chemically castrating paedophiles, I would have laughed in your face. But of course, because if someone had actually rung in with personal experience of that very specific practice, it would have been quite spectacularly inappropriate to play out one of our jolly little japes live on the programme. But absolutely everybody in full approval of the decision to give one to Barry. And that, for the 10 millionth time, that is why I love this job so much.
James O'Brien on LBC.
I like this from Philip. James, I love you. Remember, if you want your message to... Actually, there is no criticism. Well, there kind of is. I love you, but I've been listening to you for too long. I'm starting to find your childish jokes so funny that I actually laughed out loud. You don't specify at which one, but it's not as funny as this. This made me laugh out loud. Luckily, off air. Having a conversation about chemically castrating sex offenders, particularly paedophiles, and Alan sent the text, bring it in for fly tippers too. 11:49 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where I mean we've managed to find a little bit of light among the shade, but it is a desperately serious conversation, and it is one that is currently under consideration by the government. If I said the phrase to you, overhauling medical and legal convention, you'd get an indication of what a big deal it would be to make this form of treatment mandatory, because it would remove the necessity of consent before treatment, which is why both Elizabeth in Glasgow and I don't think the mandatory element is likely to kick in, and don't think it is that big a problem. It's certainly not a reason to chuck out the whole proposal because of that. And speaking of chucking out the whole proposal, Mick's been in touch to say the objections I hear to chemical castration sound like arguing that making seatbelts mandatory won't prevent every death caused by driving. So why should we bother at all? It's a perfect example of letting the perfect be the enemy of the good. I think you're right, Mick. Catherine is in Lowestoft. Catherine, what would you like to say?
Hello, thank you for taking my call.
Welcome.
I'm a little bit nervous about this topic, but okay. So I am a survivor of child abuse, and I would like to approach this a slightly different way.
Of course.
And the thing is, when a child is abused, it changes them. It changes their chemical makeup. It sexualizes them way too early, and they're not ready for that. So it alters things in you. And I know this because I've lived it, and I've had some therapy, and I understand enough for myself. So, and over the years, the mistakes that I have made and the madness that I sort of had in my life for a while, I understand now, and I wonder who would I have been if that hadn't happened?
Yes.
Would I have reached my full potential? Would I have been a better person, a more stable person? So I think it should be mandatory, because we have an obligation as a civilized, responsible, caring society to protect the potential victims that haven't been touched yet. So if we can bring those numbers down by 60% success rate, that's 60% more children that will go on to lead happier, more fruitful, in general, you know, disregarding any other tragedies, lives that won't have the conflict in their heads about who are they. They won't have the conflict in their head that says, is my worth purely sexual? And I'm 8. You know, is this who I am? Is this why I was put on this earth?
Yeah.
No, I'm good. No, it's okay. The reason I can call is because I'm not ashamed of any of it, because it wasn't my fault.
Exactly.
But for a long time I thought I must have done something, and I didn't. I know that now. But I'm also much older now. So if I could speak to my younger self and tell her it wasn't your fault, what I would actually like to do is just avoid it altogether.
Yeah.
And I don't doubt for 1 second that these people that are driven and they have this noise in their head lead miserable lives. So let's help them too. Let's give them somewhere to go and say, this is what we're going to do. And then we're saving a swathe of young children, male and female, that can go on to maybe not have as much difficulty in their already difficult lives. Life is tough out there, you know. Let's give them, we owe them that. We so owe them that, James. Sorry.
What are you apologising for?
I just got a bit emotional there.
I
Sorry.
think that's allowed in the circumstances, isn't it? I mean, some people would point out that we can't legislate on the grounds of individual experience, but I don't think you are. I think you're if you come at it in technical terms, you're prioritising victim reduction, and the only way you can do that is to prioritise crime reduction, and either that means that you prioritise criminal reduction or capacity to commit crime reduction, and that's why it's a no-brainer for you. Here is an opportunity to cut the capacity to commit these hideous crimes. Are you in or are you out? I'm 159% in.
And also, then, you know, the children that are saved from it, I mean, we won't know who they are, obviously.
No, of course not.
But they have that opportunity to, you know, deal with life's difficulties without that in their background as well, because it does such tragic damage for a period of time until you can come to terms, get help, and not like talk about it from the rooftops, but even the initial, when you're a child, making sense of what's happened to you and having, you don't even have the right vocabulary to explain what was done. You just know something was done, and it makes you feel funny. It's that expression, I felt funny. Yeah. So Let's nip that in the bud. Let's stop that right now and give loads of people a chance just to get on with, it's tough enough social media and, food addiction and all this. Let's let them run and not have that as well, a noise in their head that this, it was terrible. And so that's I'm coming at it that way. And I think that the perpetrators know better. They know that it's terrible. So let's give them a lifeline too. Let's just help where we can with this. And your previous caller before the break, I think she meant well, but God, I found her hard work. And it was that thing about, we better not because I was glad.
Well, she did work in the sector. I mean, she did work in the sector. So her personal experiences would be very different from yours, but they would have, of course, informed her position as well. But I can tell you that at least one of my correspondents has stood up, and here you go. Daniel writes, I have just physically applauded your current caller. Absolutely amazing contribution and very emotional as well. So there you go.
Oh, thank you.
No, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks, James, for covering this topic. Great work. Thank you. Bye-bye.
It's 11:55. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Justice Secretary has been on her feet in the House of Commons while we've been on air discussing this very issue. And Fraser Knight will join me imminently to tell us what she's been saying. Before that, possibly a necessarily brief word with Sabrina, who's in Hertford, about this. Sabrina, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello.
Thanks for covering this subject. I think it's really important. So I come at this subject with no answers. I don't think many of us can have clear answers on this.
True.
But a very conflicting experience, because I am a mother and obviously can empathise with this, but also as a GP and someone who's worked as a forensic physician with perpetrators who've been convicted of sexual offences, even those against children.
Yes.
I think it's a really good topic to be having, and they're very healthy conversations, but to legislate and from a medical perspective as a doctor, I think it would be something very difficult to implement.
The mandatory bit.
Yeah, the mandatory bit, in terms of us having to gain informed consent.
Well, that would have to change. I mean, there'd be quite far-reaching, as David Gork acknowledges, quite far-reaching legislative change, legislative convention and medical convention, as you're describing, would be turned upside down in a way.
In every case, we need to make sure we are abiding to certain ethical pillars, and that is one of the strongest ones of our practice.
There are psychiatric patients who can't consent to medication, aren't there? I mean, it's not an entirely unexplored territory.
Oh, no, it's one that's explored daily by physicians. But even in those cases, we have to prove against all cases that they have absolutely no capacity, and we try our best to think about them before their condition, what's important to them, take their family into account, things like that. And often we have to actually go to the courts and get a deprivation of liberty calling to say that we can.
And so this all just sounds a little bit too easy. Well, stay tuned, Sabrina, because Fraser Knight is about to talk us through what has just been announced in the House of Commons. Fraser, welcome.
James, Shabana Mahmood, the Justice Secretary, has been outlining the government's response to this review. And in there, of course, there's been a lot of focus on this recommendation from David Gauke around chemical castration. Now, Shabana Mahmood had said that she agrees that the pilot needs to continue that has been underway in the southwest in a number of prisons since 2022. But she says that this government actually is going to go further than that and look at whether and begin rolling it out nationally. Here's what she said.
The review has recommended we continue a pilot of so-called medication to manage problematic sexual arousal. I will go further, with a national rollout beginning in 2 regions covering 20 prisons, and I am exploring whether mandating the approach is possible. Of course, it is vital that this approach is taken alongside psychological interventions that target other causes of offending, like asserting power and control.
So there it is. The pilots that the Justice Secretary refers to are not mandatory.
They're not, no. So this is where offenders can choose to go through that process. But now she's said that they are going to explore whether they can make it mandatory. Just for a bit of context of how many prisons have used this so far. It started in 2007, HMP Watton. There were then 6 more prisons that piloted it in 2016, and then 5 more in the southwest from 2022. But we understand the funding for that pilot wasn't set to continue past next year. But now that confirmation from the Justice Secretary that they will roll it out nationally, 20 prisons to begin with, and also looking at whether they can make it mandatory.
Fraser Knight, many thanks. I don't often do this, but Martin in Newcastle sent a text a few moments ago, which is pretty close to constituting a last word on this conversation at this point. There are still variables, aren't there? There are still undecided. It's most obviously the wisdom of making it all mandatory. But listen to this. This is extraordinary. James, writes Martin, I worked in the prison service for many years, and during those years I lost count of the number of sex offenders who on the day of their discharge said to me, please boss, don't let me out. I know I'm going to offend again, I can't help it. So I think it will be interesting to see how many offenders volunteer for this process. Once again, straight from the sort of front line of where this kind of policy could end up. Up next though, it's Mystery Hour.
James O'Brien on LBC.
Oh, there it is. 3 minutes after 12 is the time. Hefty week, so far? I know it's far from over, but we've waded into some fairly heavy topics together, and I thank you for keeping me company during those moments, as much as you kindly sometimes thank me. But unlikely to be anything too heavy or serious between now and 1 o'clock, because Mystery Hour is upon us. Your weekly opportunity to achieve the sort of satisfaction not ordinarily available anywhere else on your radio dial. The way it works is this. There is a mystery. If not nestling in your head, then nestling in somebody else's. It might look like a riddle, a conundrum, an enigma. But one thing unites them all. We believe that there will be answers to them. And somebody else listening to the programme will be in a position to provide that answer. So, someone rings in to ask a question, and then, by the appliance of science, someone rings in to answer it. There you go. What's better, when I speed up like that to just squeeze it in before the end, or when I completely ignore it and talk over it, or when I try and deploy the rhythmic crescendo into my words and largely fail? Which do you prefer, Keith? A, B or C? Wasn't listening. If you are responsible for my favourite contribution of the week, then you will receive a Mystery Hour board game. The real deal. It's a fantastic bit of kit. Satisfy customers up and down the land. And of course, the people who got it for free are going to be doubly satisfied as well. You can find out the full terms and conditions for that conversation at lbc.co.uk. And you can find out more about the board game. You can, in fact, buy your own board game at mysteryhour.co.uk. If you want to get a question on the board, 03456060973 is the number that you need. 5 minutes after 12 is the time. Should we just crack on? Do we need any other information? I mean, I usually offer up a guarantee of a laugh out loud moment. No one's ever asked for a refund on that promise. And similarly, I usually stress that by 1 o'clock today, you will know more than you do now. It may not prove to be information that has any use whatsoever, or even knowledge that is still in your brain by 10 past 1 today. But nonetheless, the guarantee is that you come to... Jonathan doesn't like it when I completely miss the ending. That'd be interesting on that. I don't really respect the rules of radio. That makes me sound like the kind of person who's got a sign up saying you don't have to be crazy to work here, but you don't have to be mad to work here, but it helps. I don't really hit the junctions much. I don't pay much attention to keeping extraneous noise out of the thing. I don't focus on the microphone like you should. I'm often doing this and probably I should respect the crescendos more, should I? The rhythmic crescendos, as they were called. But anyway, it's probably too late to change. 6 minutes after 12 is the time. Andy's in Brighton. Andy, question or answer?
Hello, mate. It's Andy. Yeah, I've got a question for you, please.
Let's do it.
Right. I've been trying to get off the doom scrolling recently.
Well done.
And I've been doing Sudokus instead.
Oh, yes.
Find it really mindful. Love it.
I like it. Yeah, I do the word ones. I do the Wordle and the crosswords and the spelling
Wordle.
bee and all that malarkey.
Yeah, spelling bee. Yeah, brilliant. Connections. Yeah,
that's it. Yes, carry on.
Right.
Yes.
I'm not bad at them, and I've been challenging myself to. the one that I do, you can do hard, medium, easy, hard, expert, and then there's nightmare level.
Is there?
And I've been
like
doing
a fifth level?
I'm all right.
Yeah. Wow.
So I've completed that. I was quite chuffed. And then I was interested. I started a new game on the nightmare level, and then I thought, I'm going to look at the expert level and see how many numbers they give you. And are they different?
Yeah.
No.
What?
You get the same amount of numbers at the beginning of expert and at the beginning of nightmare. So I wondered, the question is, how is the difficulty determined?
Of a Sudoku. So you'd have thought the number of clues. Would be? I mean, if you've got the same number of numbers in the grid, then it must be the placement of the numbers that delivers.
That's what I would have thought.
Can't be anything else, can it?
The thing is, though, I know I'm not allowed more than one question, but this is sort of
go on.
Well, basically, I think that Sudoku predates computer algorithms, assuming it's an algorithm that would create that. So is it
So humans would have done them originally. Humans would have done them originally.
Is that the case? And so
I don't know. You're right. That's not. You're not allowed another question. But it feels like a sort of ancient Chinese practice, doesn't it, or something like that? I don't know. How do you do really hard ones?
Patiently.
So do you? Yeah, but I have because I never go above medium. In fact, I rarely go above easy, to be honest with you, because, as I say, I'm more of a word man. But do you just have to take ages to actually calculate every individual square and possibilities? We may never know, because Andy's just dropped off the line. Julie's it's Bemster, isn't it, Julia?
Yes, that's how sort of the locals say it.
Well,
I say Beminster, Beaminster.
No, Bemster. I see Bemster, I do. I say Bemster, that's how it should be pronounced.
Well,
Question or answer, Julia?
I have a question for you.
Let's do it.
Sometimes I find myself listening to the same song over and over and over and over again.
Oh, yes.
And I just wondered why that might be. Is there like a deep, meaningful reason for that? Or is it's a song that makes me happy, therefore it makes me happy all the time, but after a few days, maybe I'm not listening to it quite so much anymore, and
well, you want something beyond because you like it.
Yeah, well, I wonder if there is that. I can appreciate that perhaps if someone's having a bad time or in a relationship and it's gone wrong, they might listen to the same song.
Yes, that's true. I once had a. Do you remember the old TDK C90 tapes when you could? Remember, you're probably too young. You make your own recordings on tapes from the radio.
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah, I once filled two sides of one 90-minute tape with repeated renditions of Boys Don't Cry by The Cure.
Well, there we go.
Because in the days before apps, it was you could do it on a record, I suppose, but it was quite hard to listen to the same song over and over again. If it was on tape, you'd have to rewind it. If it was on vinyl, you'd have to pick the needle up and move it back. If it was on, I suppose remote controls changed it slightly, and CDs made it easier. But generally speaking, it's a phenomenon of the internet age, isn't it? The ability to listen to a song again and again and again and again. You can just stick it on repeat. You can just press a button. You never need to listen to anything else again. What's the last song that you had on repeat, Julia, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, this is where am I going to reveal what it is and embarrass myself in front of everyone. So my son and I are big Eurovision fans.
Uh-oh.
Have I immediately gone down?
No, not at all. Loads of people love Eurovision.
Anyway, yes, there was a song from last year which actually ended up being last. It was the Norwegian song. And there was something in it that just absolutely I just loved. And I had it on repeat.
So the least popular song in the entire Eurovision Song Contest became an earworm for you that you could listen to again and again and again and again.
Yes.
That's absolutely lovely. I always want to let them know, because it might make up for some of the disappointment of coming last.
Well, my son was amazing. He bought me tickets to a concert of theirs, and I went to them live. So.
Well, someone needs to tell them they're big in Bemster. What is going on when a song among all the other songs just grabs us to such a degree that we don't just want to listen to it or look forward to the next time it comes round. We want to listen to it again and again and again and again and again. I wonder what the most common song is. It's the same sort of principle as an earworm. A melody gets stuck in your head maybe and you just want to hear it. You want to feed the worm. I don't know. Another one I had. Does anyone remember I Just Died in Your Arms Tonight by the Cutting Crew. I had that. I think I had another tape. I had Boys Don't Cry on one of them, and I think I did I Just Died in Your Arms Tonight by Cutting Crew as well, because I could listen to that 100 times a day. 12 minutes after 12. I'm going back to my teenage years, that's all. I mean, obviously there's songs that I listen to on repeat these days, but not quite to the degree where I would go to the trouble of recording a 90-minute cassette with nothing on it but the same song over and over again. What a lovely question. Thank you, Julia. Rob's in Croydon. Rob, question or answer?
I've got a question.
I've got a problem. I haven't written
your taste in music, I think.
Well played. I haven't written anything down. Keith, are you keeping notes? That's all right. I haven't got a pen and I haven't written anything down. I don't know how that's happened. What is your question, Robert?
Okay. Humans are left or right-handed.
Correct.
And that's usually according to which side of their brain is dominant.
Is it?
Does the same thing happen in animals?
Yes.
Oh. Short answer?
Well, because I think this question's come up before, hasn't it?
Oh, okay.
Dogs, you can definitely have a dog that favours its left-hand side, as opposed to its...
Okay.
And if we can have it with a dog, then the answer to your question is yes. Qualifications, I don't know. I remember someone else telling... Is that going to be good enough? It's not, is it? I need to...
Yeah, unless anyone knows better.
Well, no. Someone's got a left-handed dog. That's all you know, or a left-pawed dog. That's all you need, really. So,
okay.
How would you know... What would they do? Because we've got a dominant hand, it's what you write with, it's what you eat with. What would a dog use its paw for in a way that's
I think with a cat, usually if you sort of dangle a piece of string in front of the cat,
they go with the same arm. They favour one paw, don't they?
Yeah. I've never noticed if some of them go with the left paw.
Oh, I like it. All right. I mean, I'm pretty sure it's yes, and I'm pretty sure that it is one that has been around before, but given that I can rarely remember what happened in the first hour of the programme, by the time we're halfway through the second hour, I should probably put it on the board and see if someone can go a little bit definitive on that one, Rob. Nice one. Thank you all. It's coming up to 12:15. Hey, guess what? Cutting Crew are supporting Marillion this weekend in Leicester, JP tells me. Oh, it's a bit of a trek for me, that, but goodness me, how exciting. And James is complaining that he's now got Boys Don't Cry stuck in his head as an earworm. You could have worse earworms, mate, than anything by The Cure, but especially perhaps Boys Don't Cry. Or Love Cats. Love Cats is pretty good too.
James O'Brien on LBC.
12:16 is the time, and like the man said, you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I hope that doesn't come as an unpleasant surprise to you. Mystery Hour is underway. We need to know how they set the difficulty levels on Sudokus, what happens when a song gets stuck in your head, who's going to go and see the Cutting Crew in Leicester, I'm joking, and whether or not animals can favour their left or their right in the same way that human beings can. Number you need is 03456060973. It's 12:16. Anthony is in Loughton. Anthony, question or answer?
Question.
Carry on.
Why do some birds hop and some birds walk?
It sounds like the beginning of a joke, that.
Yeah, I know.
But there's no punchline.
No, not that I can think of. I might think of one while you're giving me an answer.
Same here as well. I was there. My brain was going at 10 to the dozen there, trying to come up with something that might constitute a decent payoff, but I've got nothing. Again, the animal-based ones come round, don't they? We should know this one.
Well, I've thought is its size and things like that, but then again, small birds tend to hop, bigger birds tend to walk, but then ostriches walk, and then wagtails really run and walk fast. So
you've given this, so you've done your research on this one, haven't you?
I sort of, in my head, and when I've watched birds,
yes,
as in tweeties.
Yes, of course. One of my colleagues was. Can I tell this story? I can tell this story, can I? One of my colleagues was late for work. I'm going to tell you something extraordinary, actually. One of my colleagues was late for work today, right? And she couldn't go to Millbank to do the political hit. She was on duty to be in the studio when the... who would it have been? Someone was in the studio to do the political interview this morning. And she told the manager why she couldn't come into work, why she was going to be late. And one of my other colleagues was given 3 guesses as to what reason she had given for being late. Right? And I witnessed this, so I know that it's true. And on his 3rd guess, he got it right. And the reason that she had for being late, and she provided, I have to say, video evidence of this, was that there was a bird in her room. There was a little bird stuck in her bedroom, and she didn't want to leave until the bird had gone out through the window. How did he guess that?
That's weird.
Isn't it? It's like, well, I prefer extraordinary. I think it's extraordinary.
I've had a bat in the kitchen, but it didn't stop me going to work, though.
No, well, it wouldn't. It wouldn't cause as much
No.
damage, perhaps, as a bird.
Exactly.
All right, why do some birds hop and some birds... Have you come up with a punchline yet, Anthony?
No, I haven't.
No, me neither. It's 12:18. Chris is in Whitney. Chris, question or answer?
Hello, James.
Hello, Chris.
Yeah, my question is, why do we all bend over double after we've just done some sort of exercise, like running across the road or maybe running for the bus or a race?
Well, doesn't it just... I mean, I presume you're getting more air into your lungs, are you, or something?
But how? Why? Why bend?
Because you've bent over, because you've bent double. So it's got to be. So, I mean, taking the pressure off. It's not something I find myself doing very often, Chris. I'm not going to lie to you. Although I am back on the tennis courts, you might want to alert the authorities.
Very good.
Why do we bend double when we're trying to get our breath back? Is it?
Yeah. That's it.
No, you're on. I like
Exactly
it. There you go. 345 60973. I've got someone new. I need a little bit more quality control going on. Every single question coming through we've done before because we've got somebody new working on the switchboard. So I'll do this one as well. But can we pay a little bit more attention to what has gone before and what hasn't, if that's all right? Richard is in Bloomsbury. Richard, question or answer?
It's a question, James.
Carry on, Richard.
Sorry, this is an old question.
Don't apologise. It's all the fun of the fair, and it helps me sell a few board games as well, because I can prove that these questions have come up before. Go on. And also, it's embarrassing that I can't remember the answers.
Why don't we fall out of bed in our sleep? Why do we not roll out of bed going clockwise? Why do we stay on the bed?
Because we do when we're little.
Yeah, I don't remember that. I know kids do.
Yeah, but that's the point, isn't it? Because there must be something that happens as we mature that stops us from needing a cot, for example.
We learn to roll a particular way.
I guess so. Or we sense when we wake up before we fall out because we've moved so quickly. I like this question. I mean, some people do fall out of bed, but I think you have to be quite drunk when you go to sleep, don't you, in order to actually fall out of bed?
I have to say, I can't remember the last time I fell out of bed.
No, nor can I.
I think maybe you sense that you're heading into open space, clear air.
So subconsciously feeling something.
Yeah, but why? You think you learn it from being a kid?
And swinging back. You must do. Just logically, something must change between the age in which you need a cot. You need, and then you move up to a bed that's got guards on the side, and then you move up to a bed that hasn't got guards on the side. So something must be changing there. So you must be learning something. Unless it's just weight-based, unless you just get heavier, and so rolling over is harder, and you don't... I mean it, actually. Rolling over gets harder as you get bigger because it involves more effort and it's less likely to happen. Why don't we all fall out of bed more often? 21 minutes after 12 is the time. Thank you very much. 0345 60973 is the number that you need. The bed, I can't read my own writing. It's so embarrassing. The bed, the birds, the left and right, the song, the Sudoku, and the bending double. Gosh, it would have taken me ages to work that out. I could improve my own handwriting. Martin is in Rousey on the Orkney Islands. Martin, question or answer?
It's a question, please, James.
Carry on.
Okay. I'm very aware that I've got a very strong West Country accent, even though I left there when I was young. While I'm speaking to you now, I can't hear my accent at all. I've got a very plain, nondescript English accent as I'm listening to myself speaking to you. If I hear a recording of my voice, it's absolutely strong and, a proper Wurzel accent. Why can't I hear it when I'm speaking, but I can hear it on a recording?
This is why I've said it before and I'll say it again. This is why I love the job. I've gone from complaining about the repetitive nature of this week's questions to getting one that A, we've never had before, B, I didn't even know was true, and C, I'm now absolutely fascinated by. Absolutely fascinated.
Well, to make it worse, if my wife or my kids, adult kids, say, go on, Dad, do your West Country accent, I will put on a West Country accent that almost anybody can do, and I can hear it when I put on a fake, if I start speaking to you like that, I can hear that as a proper West Country, almost Jana Devonshire accent, even though I was in Wiltshire. Yeah. But as I'm speaking to you now, I'm not Terry Thomas, and there's one for the younger viewers.
No, or Leslie
look
Phillips.
up on
Yes.
it. But it's just a plain English spoken voice with no accent at all. I couldn't guess it if I was listening to it, unless it's on a recording.
But you've dropped consonants, do you, or something like that? If you
I think as I got older, I don't say water, butter, and stuff like that. You know,
Water and butter.
I'm doing it again. I'm going straight into my fake West Country words.
But I'm trying to listen to my own voice, and I'm conscious of dropping some of my T's at the end of words, or even in the middle of words. I'm conscious of. I'm trying to hear my own voice. Does my own voice? Because. Yeah,
but it's the flesh of the accent, rather than the sort of peaks, if you like.
No, I get it. The timbre.
Yeah, exactly. The timbre and the just general delivery. The cadence doesn't matter.
What does anybody hear? What do you think Jacob Rees-Mogg hears when he talks?
That's not. Did you hear the late evening show any time? I'll phone back in.
Same old bills that the rest of us here, but I was thinking more about his accent. I think Terry Thomas Bruce says he was from North London. I love that. I have never heard that before. Have you ever heard that before? Is that true? Can you hear your accent? I can't do supplementary questions. I can hear my, what's the word I want? The demotic almost. I can hear I know I'm not posh, right? Well, that is absolutely fascinating. 25 minutes after 12 is the time. Jennifer is in Stilton. Jennifer, how are you?
We're doing all right, actually. Thank you, Jane.
Well done.
Are you okay?
Can't complain, Jennifer. Thank you again for all the cheese that you have sent me over the years.
You're always welcome.
Do you have a question or answer this week?
Oh, it's always question. It's never going to be answer, James. Don't
have a little faith. What is it? Go on.
Toothache. So I'd consider myself to have pretty high pain threshold. Broken bones. Had an organ removed. Had heart surgery.
Listen to this programme for years.
None of which compare to the treat that is a tooth root abscess.
Yeah.
Had one last week.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Literally. It's all right. I was pacing the room, couldn't think straight, nothing. And I thought to myself, is it the complexity of nerves in the face? Is it that facial nerves are more sensitive? Because bearing in mind, the tooth is quite a small object.
Yeah, but the nerve isn't, is it? It's the nerve, it goes right into it. I mean, what we're wondering, I think, is the evolutionary explanation for it. Because usually there's a reason why these things happen if it's in our bodies. And why does the pain you get from a bad tooth overshadow the pain you get from almost anything else? I mean, there is almost nothing like it, is there?
Yeah, I don't know if you've had one before, but it's just horrendous. I mean,
I've never had an abscess, no, but I've had a terrible toothache. I'm very really.
If I'd have
I've had an infected, impacted wisdom tooth as well.
Oh, yeah, the wisdom teeth are always the worst.
That's pretty nasty. They keep you awake nasty.
The point of them.
But why do the teeth cause us? I have a theory, Jan. I don't know if you want to hear it.
Go on, always.
I'm surprised that our teeth have not evolved better, actually. I mean, by now, you'd have thought that we had two massive teeth, like two sort of plates in our mouth, and we'd have got rid of the nerves. Because what is the point of all this internal engineering in our mouth when really all it does is causes grief and problems? So you'd have thought we'd have evolved to have teeth that never chip, for example, teeth that don't get cavities, teeth that don't get abscesses, nerves that don't cause us unimaginable pain, and the answer must be that they don't have any. There's no sexual advantage from having better teeth.
Well, I mean, it must be to do with the nerve. But I mean, the whole instance of losing your teeth when you're a baby and your toddler get your big teeth. Why not spread that out? Why not have your teeth fall out and get new shiny ones when you're about 30?
Well, again, I think there's no sexual advantage from it. I'll tell you what, we'll find out. It's hideous, this. And is it over now? Are you over the worst?
Oh yeah, I'm over the worst. But oh my good Lord, it was horrendous.
Oh my days, Jen, take care. Thank you for that. And I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. Howard is in Sydenham. Howard, question or answer?
Hi, James. It's a question.
Carry on, Howard.
And I guarantee you haven't had this one before.
Good man.
I was talking to an engineering friend of mine, and he does all sorts of work with all sorts of metal. And he asked me, how come you can put two little screws in the wall, put a cupboard on those two little screws and fill the cupboard with the heavier stuff you might have, like crockery or books, and it doesn't fall down.
It's not about the screw, is it? It's about what you're screwing into. Because
it says the wall is not doing any supporting. It's all going through the screws. Yeah, it's all going through the screws.
Through the screws. Hang on, I'm just conducting a small experiment in the studio. Just bear with me a minute.
Careful.
No, very wise. Hang on. What can I use as use a piece of paper? So, just talk among yourselves. Do you know any jokes, Howard? Keep it clean. Keep it clean. Hang on, I'm just...
Why does a rabbit only ever run halfway into the woods?
I said keep it clean.
It is clean.
Go on,
it's an
then.
old Norfolk joke.
Go on then.
And the answer is because once he's halfway in, he's on the way out.
Normal for Norfolk, that one, Howard.
Yeah, it is.
Are you sure it's got nothing to do with the wall?
It's got nothing at all. The pressure is all on the screws.
So do you know the answer?
No.
No, good.
He doesn't know either. And he's
nor
an
do I
engineer.
now. Nor do I now.
No.
All right, so two screws. But then why do shelves fall down then?
I think that's because people don't drill the holes right, isn't it?
Well, then it's got to be about the wall.
No, because the screw comes loose in the wall and you end up with a load of broken plaster on the wall, don't you? And
I think that's because the wall is a little bit softer, a little bit. Anyway, right, you're on. How can two relatively small screws support the weight of an entire cupboard or shelf? One of my happiest childhood memories, Howard. I was lying in bed on Sunday morning, and I was about 12, and I heard this plaintive cry from downstairs, like help, help, help. And I completely ignored it because it was my sister. And my parents completely ignored it as well because they were probably asleep. I made my way downstairs about half an hour later for my breakfast. And my sister had somehow, and I never found out how, she'd ended up supporting the weight of a bookshelf. That had, I don't know whether it had started creaking and she'd rushed over to save it. So she was there and she decided not to just let everything fall on the floor. She'd been like Atlas holding up the world, Howard. She'd been holding up the bookshelf for about an hour. I thought it was one of the funniest things I'd ever seen. I left her there for a while before I helped her. That's what big brothers are for. You're on, Howard. We'll find out for you. It's all about the screws. Or is it the wall? Either way, Tim Humphrey has your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
12:33 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. So, how do they set the difficulty of a Sudoku? What happens when a song really gets stuck in your head? Not an earworm, when you want to listen to it again and again and again and again and again. Do any other creatures favour their left or right side in the way that humans do? Why do some birds hop and other birds walk? What happens when we bend double? Why do we bend double when we're trying to get our breath back? Why don't we fall out of bed more? Why can't we hear our own accents? And at the moment, Martin is my only case study on this. But if other people tell you you've got a strong accent, does that come as... I don't know what the question was, actually. But why doesn't Martin hear his own accent, really, was the question. So you have to hope it's an observation that extends beyond Martin. But we don't currently know. Why is toothache so painful? In other words, what possible evolutionary reason can there be for that part of our body to be susceptible to such extraordinary levels of pain? And how can two little screws hold up a whole cupboard? There's quite a lot to be getting on with there, I think. Mark, marvellous. I can guess what question Mark is doing. Mark is in Barrow in Furness. Mark, question or answer?
It's an answer, and it's about the accent.
Carry on, Mark.
Nice to speak with you again. Yeah,
always good to hear your voice.
Of course,
accent or otherwise. Carry on.
Well, yeah, of course, there is no such thing as having no accent.
No.
Everybody has some accent. But some accents are less specific and more neutral than others, not as strong as others.
Yes.
And I know this for having grown up near Liverpool, but in an area where the accent is not markedly Liverpudlian.
Okay.
It's a more middle-class area, and you don't tend to get the broad scouse.
Was it the Wirral?
On the Wirral, yes, the wonderful Wirral. And many people, most people, I think, unless they've been exposed to a range of other accents, think of their own accent as pretty neutral.
Oh, okay.
And, I remember people saying, oh, they in Liverpool have a strong accent and we don't. But one reason for this is that when you speak and you listen to yourself, you're hearing your speech not just through the air, but through your head, through the physiology of your head.
Oh, yeah.
And you become accustomed to that all your life. Whereas if you hear yourself in a recording, that's a different experience. It's coming through the air to your ears only. And it will often strike you as different. Many people are surprised when they hear their voice on the radio or in a recording, and some don't like it at all. I remember I once went out with someone who hated the sound of her own voice on the radio and didn't even realise it was her at first.
Gosh.
And it's almost like listening to somebody else who does have that accent when you hear yourself.
So
on a recording.
I get the why it doesn't sound the same, but I don't fully get why you don't hear your own accent.
Well, because you're totally accustomed to it all your life.
That's the only voice you know.
Unless you've had an accent switch somehow.
So do you hear your accent when you talk?
When I'm being non-linguistic and just pre-theoretical, I guess I have the same experience. That it doesn't sound to me as if I have much of an accent.
But you know if you're shortening or lengthening your A's, you know whether you're dropping your T's or whether you're.
But I'm very unusually aware of that because I've done phonetics and all the rest.
Yes, of course.
If my accent switches, I once was on BBC Radio Oxford talking about rugby league.
Yes.
And I sounded quite posh.
Did you?
And then I was also on Radio Merseyside talking about the very same topic and sounded more Scouse. Because I was fitting in with the local environment.
And is that normal, or is that because of your expertise?
That I think is quite normal.
Yeah, I think I do too.
You don't do it consciously.
No, I don't do it as much as I used to, because it would be a bit of a bind if I did it in this job as violently as I did in other jobs. But we've all done it, I think.
I think it's someone like me who studied this is more aware of it.
Yes.
I had a lecturer who, in fact, my PhD supervisor, who was from Norwich, and he used to demonstrate a broad Norwich accent in class.
Yes.
And then he was saying, I can speak like this all the time if I want to. And he switched between that and a more RP-like, more BBC-like accent, especially because he had foreign students, some of whom might have struggled to understand the broad
And a lot of kids, of course, have a very different way of speaking when they're with their friends as they do when they're with their parents.
We all do this. Our language is partly determined by the social environment we're in and the context. But some have a bigger experience of this than others.
So there's two things going on. There's pitch, if you like, or resonance, which explains why we sound so different. And then there is just your kind of baked-in sense of normality, which is because that's the only accent you ever hear. You don't realise it's an accent when it's your own.
And this will even apply to someone who has no variation in their accent, who always speaks with the same accent. But it gets even more complex if you are actually moving between accents.
Fantastic. Qualifications?
Long-standing professional linguist.
That'll do nicely. No, another round of applause for Mark, please. We haven't had a nice linguistic question for a while. Thank you, Mark. Tom is in Stockholm. Tom, question or answer?
Hi, James. Big fan. First time calling to you. I have a question.
Welcome.
Thank you. So basically, I noticed recently some churches in England have black and white square tiles in the sort of front area before the altar.
Right.
And I noticed it, for instance, like if you look at the Queen's funeral, you can see the black and white tiles. And then I noticed, so that's St. George's, I believe.
Yeah.
And then I noticed in Savoy Chapel, I was doing some research on that, and I saw that, hang on. And then I noticed that, oh my God, it's like the two. And they're both royal chapels, so I thought maybe something royal. But then I found a church in Sweden that also has black and white square diamond tiles. Yeah. And now I can't figure out. I've tried Googling, I cannot find an answer.
I'm having that. It could be. You're talking about a chessboard, really, aren't you?
Yeah, it's basically chessboard, but the entire floor. So Savoy Chapel in London is the entire floor.
Is it because bishops move diagonally?
Yes, I see what you're
That's a very good
yeah.
joke, and it's not my own. Callum came up with that, even while you were still asking the question. I don't know whether he's heard it before, but is it going to be black and white, good and evil?
Well, that's the closest I can come up with, but like I can't.
There may not be. Or Jack says it's to prevent the bishops from capturing the altar. There may not be a definitive answer to this. It may just be people. Why do we have black and white tiles anywhere? Because they look quite nice, and they're probably the easiest to make. But I'm going to put it on the board. Why do churches, so many churches, particularly I think medieval churches or that kind of area? Why does
one of the answers? Sorry to cut you off. Was Victorian. Someone said it was Victorian thing, so maybe. But then finding one in Sweden, it's not Victorian era, but I don't know then if it's the century. But
no, you're on. Yeah. Let's put it. So there we go. So why does? Thank you, Tom. Why do so many churches have black and white tiles? Andrew is in Milton Keynes. Andrew, question or answer?
Answer.
Carry on, Andrew.
It's to do with the cupboard falling off the wall.
Oh yes.
So it's basically the reason why the cupboard stays on the wall is the sheer strength of the screw. So that if you've got a screw in a good fixing in the wall, so we have to ignore how good the fixing is in the wall.
Why? Hang on. Surely the fixing is important.
It is important, but it's a variable. So if you fix it badly, the cupboard will come off the wall. Okay. The reason why the cupboard stays on the wall is the sheer strength of the screw. So what you've got is a screw going through, and for that to break, that screw in the horizontal plane, to break on the vertical plane, the actual strength that it takes to actually break that screw is greater than the weight in the cupboard.
Wow.
I actually got really. I'm a builder, and we were putting in an RSJ, holding up the side of the house, and the side of the house was held on four bolts at the end of this RSJ. And I phoned up the structural engineer, and I said, "How can the whole of that house be held up with 4 bolts?"
Yeah.
And he said the sheer strength of that bolt. I can't remember what it was, but it was basically 3 of the bolts would actually hold the side of the house up, not 4. And it's when you've got something in the vertical plane, trying to break something in the horizontal plane, the strength that's required to do that is very great. So, okay, when you put a cupboard on the wall, if it's badly fixed, it will fall off, but it's the way it's badly fixed. It's not the screw that's failing.
Does the length of the screw make any difference?
Well, that comes back to the fixing. It depends what your substrate is.
So the worse the fixing, the more important the length of the screw becomes.
Yes. Well, no. Basically, the length of the screw will affect the strength of it pulling out.
Of course, it will. But if you've got a really good fixing, then you could get away with quite a little screw.
Yeah.
Wow, that's absolutely. You've already given me your qualifications, but the rules insist that I ask you anyway. What are your qualifications, Andrew?
I've been a builder for about 40 years.
There you go. That's a lot of screws, mate.
If only.
A round of applause. Today's programme is sponsored by Finbar Saunders and his double entendres. Barry is in Omagh in Northern Ireland. Barry, question or answer?
Answer, please, James.
Carry on, Barry.
Toothache question. Why is toothache so excruciatingly sore? 2 key reasons. 1, your cranial nerves, that is all the nerves in your face, your hearing, your eyesight, all are particularly sensitive because they go straight through your skull to the brain.
Right.
They don't connect through the spinal cord.
Oh, okay.
So imagine cutting out the exchange from a phone call. It's just simpler, straighter, less connections, fewer synapses.
Yeah, nicely put. Yeah.
And the evolutionary benefit of that is you really, really want to know if something is harming your skull. That's why we have such strong nerve supply. Okay? But the other key reason is if you get an infection, it will try to swell.
Yes.
If you've ever had a pimple or a cut on your hand.
Yes.
Because more blood supply goes to it. It swells. If you press on it, it's sore. Well, there is nowhere to swell inside a tooth. Think of the nerve of a tooth as being in a box. It cannot expand because it's surrounded by this structure of calcium.
Yeah, of course.
And that lady who said she had an abscess on her root, equally, your root is embedded in bone.
Gosh.
And that sometimes is why people say, I had mad toothache for 3 days, and now it has subsided. That's because your swelling has actually punctured through the bone and is...
Whoa, really?
Yeah.
Well, you live and learn. That's a great answer, actually. Qualifications?
Qualifications, 40 years a dentist.
That'll do. I don't think anyone thought you Googled that, Barry. Give him a round of applause. Of course, you don't want to swear. Well, that's a cracking mystery hour. That's what happens when I complain. If I complain early, then things go. I like to think I can turn all oil tankers around. It's 12:46.
James O'Brien on LBC.
12:49 is the time, and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Well, we better just crack on, actually. I need answers to the Sudoku question. How do they set the difficulty? To the song question, why do we sometimes want to play the same song again and again and again? There's a free round of applause up for someone who can answer the left and right dog, cat, mammal question, because I'm sure we've answered it before. Ditto Anthony's question about birds hopping and walking. Why do we bend double when we think, or when we're trying to get our breath back quicker than usual? Why don't we fall out of bed? Lovely question on accents from Mark. We've done the toothache, we've done the cupboard. Why are so many tiles in churches black and white? Jason is in Gravesend. Jason, question or answer?
Question, please, James.
Carry on, mate.
So, when I sneeze, I'll sneeze for at least a dozen times.
A dozen?
Yeah.
What, every time?
Yeah, every time.
Extraordinary.
Every time. Absolute minimum. Sometimes I could sneeze for 10, 15 minutes. Pretty much non-stop.
Good grief.
Whereas some people just like a couple of sneezes and they're done. And
so I can do one sometimes, mate.
It's so frustrating when it doesn't stop. Sometimes a second sneeze starts before the first one's ended, and then you can't breathe.
I've never heard anything like it. You could have been on Record Breakers when you were a kid. Do you remember there was a kid on Record Breakers who couldn't stop sneezing?
Well, they're called sneezers, but why?
Are they?
Why? Yeah.
Why some people and not others?
Yes.
Well, I thought you'd have found out by now, Jason, given that it's been going on all your life.
Well, you don't know how old I am.
No, well, that's very true, but I bet you're older than 12.
Yeah, actually, I'm 55.
Okay, so pollen, asthma, all the obvious answers, but then there'll be people who suffer from asthma who don't sneeze. Yeah. 15 on the go. George says, I always sneeze 8 times, never more or never less. Or every single time I sneeze, I can't sneeze once. So yours is variable. It could be anything between, 10 and 15, 5 and 15?
Yeah, or hundreds.
Actually, hundreds. You could actually spend, like you said, 15 minutes just going, achoo.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So explain sneezes. And thank you for introducing a new word to my vocabulary as well. Because lots of people have allergies. There must be a bigger answer to it than that. I love that quote. Jason, take care. All right, literally. Sal's in Paddington. Sal, question or answer?
Answer.
Carry on.
About black and white tiling and checkered patterns,
Marvellous.
Which are some of the oldest symbols that mankind has ever used, and go back as far as ancient Mesopotamia.
Yes.
Including the chessboard, which you mentioned.
It was. Hang on, I'm just interrupting you. It was hiccuping on Record Breakers. It wasn't sneezing. I just want to correct that for the record. Carry on, Sal.
No problem. And it's basically one of the oldest symbolic representations of the eternal struggle between good and evil, or light and dark. And so the chessboard, for example, has been around in that sort of form for since over 5,000 years now, because our oldest form of representing it has been traced back to Mesopotamia.
There you go. And so that would just be repeated in. I think the Freemasons are quite big on black and white checker as well.
It's part of the story that they use as allegory to talk about life, death, and our place in the universe. And in front of the altar, it represents that all that is created is within sight and controlled by the Almighty.
Love it. Qualifications?
I'm a clergyman, and I studied the history of religion and its effect on policy and polity as my degree.
Amen.
Yes.
Lovely work, Sal. Thank you very much. 12:53 is the time. Peter is in Leeds. Question or answer, Peter?
Answer. Why do you bend forward?
Yes.
After a run?
Yes.
The reason is, normally you breathe using the muscles between your ribs and your chest. But if you bend forward and put your arms on your knees or your legs, your arms are fixed. So the muscles between your arms and your chest then contract and open your lungs even more, so you get more oxygen in.
Yeah, you're right. I'm doing it now. That's why my voice has gone a bit faint. I'm further away from the microphone. Yeah, you're right. You can get more air in your lungs.
The ribs work like bucket handles swinging on your chest, whereas the muscles between your arms and your ribs just pull the ribs up even further.
Love it. Qualifications?
I'm a doctor. I'm one of the 15% of locum GPs who can't get work because there isn't any funding.
Are you really? It's insane, isn't it?
And 50% of the trainees coming out next week will not have stable employment.
Well, fair play to you for smuggling some fairly hefty politics into the 1 hour of the week where we try to avoid it. But on this occasion, I think that's entirely forgivable.
But nobody else is listening, so I thought it was a crafty way. And I did leave it till the end.
No, you're absolutely right. It's a national scandal. Kids coming out of medical school who can't get jobs, or as you say, can't get stable employment.
These are fully trained GPs, and 51%.
I'm adding to the problem. I'm saying as well as, but the GPs and the locums that can't get hired when we keep hearing about shortages and how hard it is to get an appointment. It doesn't make sense.
Exactly. So I'm sorry for misusing you, but nobody else.
No, I'm here to be misused, Peter. Have a round of applause.
I did leave it to everybody else.
You did. No, thank you, mate. And seriously, no criticism from me. That's the nature of activism, isn't it? You get it's the nature of campaigning as you use whatever opportunity you can. Oliver is in Newry. Oliver, question or answer?
It's an answer, please, James.
Carry on, Oliver.
So, listen, I don't want to be nasty, but the last guy was probably partly right about the screws, but he didn't
Builders'
give you
war. Builders' war.
Well, he didn't get it quite right, but essentially there's a few things that need to be talked about. You don't talk about screws. What you need to talk about is anchors.
Okay.
So a screw needs to be anchored into something. So you drill a hole in the wall, you put a plug in there, you fill it, you fill the hole, you fill the plug with the screw, which creates pressure, which creates the shear strength that is needed for the thing to hang, but also the size and girth of that screw is very fundamentally important. Obviously the girth because of the pressure, but the length because you need to use a system that's about what we call 4-to-1, where if you want to screw a 20 millimeter say board into a wall, you have to have at least 80 millimeters or thereabouts of screw going into the wall. So on a part, if you split it down to 4, an 80 mil screw will go through 20 mil and then into 60 mil of wall and plug.
I don't think you're correcting him. I think you're just adding to his answer.
I'm just adding. Yeah. I'm just trying to give it a more fuller answer. I know that you haven't had a lot of answers in today, which could have contributed something different, but,
We're doing our best, Oliver.
Yeah, I know.
We're doing our best. Hang on, where's that cupboard? So Oliver, Andrew and Howard. I've now got 3 names on my cupboard line. Qualifications?
I've been a carpenter for a long time.
For a long time. Love it. Have a round of applause on me.
Thanks very much.
No, thank you very much. 12:56. Lewis is in Slindon. Slindon? Is it Slindon? I've never heard of Slindon. Question or answer, Lewis?
Answer, James. Left-handedness.
Oh, good man. Go on.
So, do we get left-handed or right-handed animals? Yes, we do. We think largely, you see it mostly, or you see it almost entirely in bipedal animals. So, all red kangaroos are left-handed. So,
all of them?
A dog or all of them.
Southpaws?
Yeah, all of them.
Cool.
That's why they box so much.
Yeah, exactly.
You also see it in humans, obviously, but we get left-handed people like myself because of sexual advantage
dogs and cats?
Bubble.
What's the sexual advantage? What's the sexual advantage to being left-handed, Lewis? It's a family program.
Well, that's how all things evolve anyway. So
yeah, I know. But what do you think the sexual advantage of being left-handed is? Surely the sexual advantage would come from being right-handed because there's more of us.
Left-handed people have a better win rate in MMA and boxing, so it's supposed that when it came about.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, exactly. So it's same with all the boxing.
You'd be fighting off your rivals more effectively.
Yes, exactly. But we don't do that anymore, so it seems like that's why left-handedness isn't taking over.
It's dogs and cats as well, everything.
Yeah, you see it in those animals, but that's not to a statistical significance. They just have one that they've learned to prefer.
Qualifications.
I have a degree in medical genetics, and I've answered this question twice on Mystery Hour before.
Don't spoil it, honestly. We're pretending that we're doing new stuff. Have you moved house as well?
No, I'm just driving down.
Oh, God, you're very specific.
To look after my mum's dog, which I couldn't say if it's left or right-handed.
Well, you'd let us know next week. Right, well, let us know on the 4th time you ring in to answer this question. Have a round of applause, Lewis.
Thank you.
Thank you. I've got to pick a favourite. I think Lewis has already won one. Jennifer's won one as well, because she told me that she had. What about Barry? I think I'm going to give it to Barry the dentist in Omar. Do you think Barry the dentist would appreciate a mystery ad ball game? He didn't say whether he was retired or not. He could leave it in the waiting room. People could have a wonderful time playing them. Yeah, Barry and Omar gets it this week. Thank you. That was a very special show. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on Catch Up and on either the Global Player or the brand new LBC app. You can stay up to date with all the latest news and opinion. You can put your news categories in the order you want. You can pause and rewind live radio, and you can listen to a range of podcasts. Download the all-new official LBC app for free from your app store now. Coming up at 4 on LBC, it's Tom Swarbrick, but now it's time for Sheila Fogarty.
James O'Brien on LBC.